Good morning. Hello, Grand Rising. How are you? Welcome to Wake Up with me, Sonia Poulton, journalist, broadcaster, and you know the third part, right? Troublemaker and proudly so. How are you all? How are you all? I am so sorry I was not here on Friday. I was absolutely exhausted. I'd been out all week, business and pleasure. I was in court on Thursday. There's an update in the link below, and I had not any time at all to prep for Friday's show. Thank you for all your concerned messages. I'm fine. I told my patrons at Patreon, and also I made a community post on YouTube to inform viewers that there wouldn't be a Friday show. Always look in those places first, darling people, before assuming that somebody might have taken me out. I also had lots of email messages from people saying they couldn't find any messages from me. They're not getting notifications on YouTube. And in fact, several have been unsubscribed on YouTube. So I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I hope you are all well. I hope you are all well. Welcome to the show that knows nothing sets the heart on fire like the truth. How are you diddling today, you beautiful people? This is our last show of 2025. So buckle in and let's get to it. So we are going to do a grand review of 2025. That will include the rise of the technocrats, how geoengineering was mainstreamed, how people are shilling on social media, the climate fraud and the big budget that has been allowed for it, Epstein's legacy, revealing the accomplices all this time after, celebrity charges, convictions, and court cases pending, plus Sean Diddy Combs' karma caught up with him. Madeleine McCann, the lie continues. Starmer's Fascist UK, the Lucy Connolly Psy-op, small boats and fighting age men. We hear that a lot, don't we? And what about Charlie and Erika Kirk? Death and fireworks. And also, I'll be looking at unsafe convictions, how the royal popularity is now in the toilet, exactly where it should be. I'll also be talking about the political infiltration of the UK, the assisted suicide bill, the rise of reform, and so much more. So much more. Happy Christmas, Rachel. How are you all, you beautiful, beautiful people? Lovely to have you here with us. Merv is already buckled in. Great to hear it. Wonderful. Happy Yule, says Happy Potter. Sonia is here to cook. I am, Mr. Dunham. Let's not mess around. Good morning, Paul. Good morning. Right, let's start at the beginning of the year. Anybody remember this? This was, of course, President Trump's second inauguration on January the 20th, 2025, when several of the world's most powerful technology executives were seated in prominent positions, often directly behind the first family and ahead of cabinet nominees. This was the moment that President Trump announced to the world the importance of technocracy to his second term in power. The following tech bosses were in attendance on that day: Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, of course, founder or co-founder, part founder of Facebook, whichever way you want to look at it. Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, X, Jeff Bezos, Amazon, Blue Origin, Tim Cook from Apple, Sundar Pichai from Google and Alphabet, Shuzi Chu from TikTok. And that was interesting because he attended at a critical time for TikTok when Trump signed an executive order delaying the potential US ban on TikTok shortly after being sworn in. Then there was Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, Dara Khosrowshahi from Uber. Rupert Murdoch was even there from News Corp and Fox, and Dana White from UFC, a longtime Trump supporter and recently appointed to the Meta board. This was, if we needed it, as clear an indication that there could possibly be that the Silicon Valley technocrats were front and center of Trump's presidency. And this was something of a turnaround from his first presidency, when Trump had positioned himself against unelected experts, against the deep state, and against bureaucracy. Yet his second administration has actively integrated tech leaders into the core of government power. That is what's happened. There has been a Silicon Valley vibe shift, as some people refer to it, when the tech elites who were previously shunned by Trump have now publicly aligned with him. And they've really sort of been driven by this common interest in deregulation, specific technologies, essentially making America its own governmental power in many key respects that will then impact the rest of the world. The core allies, of course, include Peter Thiel, Mark Anderson, and Ben Horowitz. And we've been told plenty about them by some of my guests this year, including Ian Davis, including Dr. David Hughes, who have both looked in some depth into technocracy and the sweeping powers that it has. And I think probably one of the clearest indications of the melding of Trump's presidency and the tech bros came very early, and that was with DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which Elon Musk was given the job of running along with Vivek Ramaswamy. And DOGE aimed, we were told, to cut federal bureaucracy / government spending. Critics labeled it techno-fascism, arguing it used technical rationality to justify authoritarian style cuts without any democratic oversight. And we saw that happening, didn't we? And the reality is, far from draining the swamp, Trump created a new one. Oh, yes, indeed he did. And some analysts point to the influence of like neo-reactionary thinkers like Curtis Yanvin, whose blueprint for a CEO-led American monarchy is informing some of Trump's presidency. And as I say, this year I've interviewed a number of people who have written extensively about this, and I've already put the links in the description so you can catch up with those interviews. How are you all in the comments? How are you? They're all on the same side. Yes, indeed they are. And yes, indeed they are, people. Yes, indeed they are. But that, I think, was as clear an indicator at the start of the year, at the start of Trump's second presidency, of what was going to be important to the globalists. We saw it. We absolutely did. And also in January, on this side of the pond, here you have Sakia Rodney Starmer and Volodymyr, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Zelensky. And what happened on January the 16th, 2025, is Keir Starmer signed a landmark 100-year partnership agreement in Kiev, and it established a legal framework for cooperation in 9 pillars, including defense, maritime security, science, and trade. And I really don't want to depress you too early on in this, but I think it's really important we talk about how hard-pressed British taxpayers are funding this shite show. Yes, indeed. In 2025, the UK significantly expanded its commitment to Ukraine, providing a record 4.5 billion in military support. All of that while our own army is depleted, right? That's just the starters. And then the UK, alongside France, was also involved in setting up the coalition of the willing. And the idea was to support Ukraine's future security and defend any eventual peace settlement, yada, yada, yada. And the UK and Germany took over leadership of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group, coordinating military requirements for over 50 nations. The UK is far too involved in other people's business while neglecting the people back home, as you will see as we continue. There were also record drone supplies. The UK invested 600 million to accelerate production, aiming to supply 100,000 drones in 2025, which was a tenfold increase from 2024. All of this for Ukraine, and we haven't finished yet. A new UK-designed defense system called Gravehawk was deployed to Ukraine. Additionally, a 1.6 billion deal was finalized to supply 5,000 lightweight multi-role missiles. Again, while our own army is depleted and they're talking about our sons and daughters going on the front line. But there's more. There is more, I'm afraid. Oh, yes, indeed, there is. In September, a 100 million humanitarian package was announced to support frontline communities and energy grid repairs in the Ukraine. The UK also launched a grain verification scheme using what we were told was advanced science to track and stop the sale of grain stolen by Russia from occupied Ukrainian regions. That's their wording, not mine. The UK further provided a 2.26 billion loan as part of the G7 Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration Initiative, which is funded by profits from frozen Russian sovereign assets. So we are sending billions and billions to a man who many people believe have a very serious addiction, wife and husband, actually. And Lisa wants to know how the masses cannot see through this shit show. Hey, we stand with Ukraine, Lisa. Get a grip, right? But there's more. The UK's primary training programme was extended until at least the end of 2026. By mid-2025, over 60,000 personnel had been trained with a new focus on developing Ukrainian instructors and leaders. And they are also, you have Ukrainian office cadets who began training at the Royal Military Academy in Sandhurst. And that's as British Army as you can get, as you can get, actually. Greed fuels all this, says Mr. Dunham. And Shug says he's probably done something with it all by now. And I think we might know the word that Shug is talking about. And Cavan said Starmer gets free suits when he puts the nation in debt forever. I think that the 100-year deal with Ukraine was so egregious. But it's far from the worst thing, actually, that has happened on Starmer's watch. So let us continue. Let us continue. In 2025, the UK actually experienced significant political shifts. And I think probably the most noticeable was the marked surge for Reform UK. It overtook both the Conservatives and Labour in some opinion polls by as early as February this year. Now, by the end of the year, Reform wasn't necessarily doing as well as it had been anticipated to have done. But nonetheless, Reform did gain numerous council seats through defections from other parties and was increasingly viewed as the primary opposition to Labour as opposed to Conservative. And I think that was quite interesting development. I'm not a supporter of Reform, but that doesn't mean I can't acknowledge the gains it made. And it definitely did make some gains. And it would be wrong not to consider that. And of course, like politically, we had a number of changes going on. The UK formalised its recognition of a Palestinian statehood. And then you had Chancellor Rachel Reeves, often known pejoratively as Rachel from accounts, primarily because most people believe that she has over-egged the pudding that is her CV. And she has obviously made some really egregious cuts. And I cannot believe that in 2025, the national living wage is still only £12.21 per hour. Who the hell can live on that? And that is why we have to have so much like universal income and universal and tax credits, which obviously they've been phasing out. Then you had things like public services. You had the abolition of NHS England. The idea was to cut bureaucracy. That isn't the NHS itself. It's essentially the sort of business workings of it. In terms of benefit changes, they scrapped the 2-child benefit cap. That will be scrapped from April 2026. We had GDP growth for 2025, which was estimated at roughly 1.4% to 1.5%, though experts warned of a potential slowdown in 2026 due to fiscal tightening and global trade uncertainty. Again, that's their words, not mine. And by the way, did you realize that in 2025, We were told that the UK experienced its sunniest year on record, 2025. Does anybody remember that? Does anybody remember the great sun of 2025? I mean, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't recall it being so great and sunny. But there you go. Oh, Sugar's using a word which begins with B and ends with locks. I like that. Try bringing a pensioner. It's half of that. What's that? Oh, got you. Got you. So, and we also had, of course, plenty of flooding that was going on in 2025. We had multiple storms, including Storm Herminia. Remember that? The great sun dimming. Oh, we're going to get to that, DJ Marcuson. Oh, we are going to get to that. You can be sure of that, my friend. You can be sure of that. So I want to talk about Sir Keir Rodney Starmer and how he's turned the UK essentially into a fascist state. It's a Fabian fascist state. Sir Keir Rodney Starmer's Fabian Labour came back into number 10 with a vengeance in 2024. And throughout 2025, the results have been very easy to see what he has done to our nation. Think about the Fabian Society, of which it was formed in order to promote Labour and socialism. And the idea about the Fabian Society, the original logo was a wolf in sheep's clothing, but they changed that because they felt it might have negative connotations. I wonder why. But much of what happened with the Fabians it's been really interesting because they believe in stealth, like a slow and steady progress. So the changes that take place under a Fabian government are almost imperceptible, and you can't necessarily see them happening only except under Keir Starmer. It was like bang right in front of our faces, and much of what happened hinged on the back of two events this year: the Gaza genocide in the Middle East and the murderous Axel Rudakubana. Now, first of all, let us talk about this. These poor, darling little girls. So Axel Rudakubana, he was age 17 at the time. He stormed a Taylor Swift themed dance workshop in Southport, England on July the 29th, 2024. He murdered these 3 young girls and he attempted to murder 10 other people, including 2 adults. These 3 girls were BB King, Elsie Stankham, and Alice Da Silva Aguirre. And Axel Rudakubana pleaded guilty to all charges on January the 20th of this year, the same date as Trump's second inauguration. And that was the first day of Axel Rudakubana's trial. On January the 23rd, 2025, he was sentenced to life imprisonment after pleading guilty to all charges. And it was said that he would spend a minimum term of 52 years inside, meaning it is highly likely he will spend the rest of his life in prison. And this, of course, has been the cause of some consternation for many people, because the judge stated that while Rudakubana's crimes did not legally meet the definition of terrorism, i.e. they lacked a political or ideological motive, their extreme nature was equivalent to terrorist acts in seriousness. I think this man is a terrorist. I don't know about you. Absolute ridiculous. The idea that this wasn't a terrorist attack. It was clearly ideologically driven. And in fact, he also had terrorism manuals, PDFs that he downloaded. People, yes, they do. People put out their own justice. Exactly. Yes, they do. An asset, says SMG. We cannot forget that, because that's important what you say there, because he had certainly been on the radar. He was known to public agencies, having been referred to the government's anti-extremism program Prevent 3 times between 2019 and 2021. A public inquiry is ongoing to understand whether the attack could have been prevented. And this played very much into Keir Starmer's attack and the Fabian attack on free speech. So what we had was Keir Starmer come out, and rather than blame all of the issues that could potentially be the problem, undocumented mass migration, Keir Starmer turned his ire to people who were protesting and who were concerned, deeming people far right. Now, yes, there were some far right amongst them, absolutely, unquestionably. But I don't think the vast majority were. The vast majority were people who were not only outraged that these three little girls, no life, they had no chance to live. So people were outraged and hurt by that. But it really was the icing on the cake. This has been going on for a very long time, and people, frankly, have had enough about it. And so what happened was Keir Starmer came out and tarred and feathered people as far right. But the truth is, the real truth is that Axel Rudakubana and what he did was a very useful, if outrageous tool for the powers that be to enact draconian measures. That is the reality. And one of those draconian measures, whichever way you want to look at it, was apparently visited on this woman, Lucy Connolly, a former childminder from Northampton, England. She gained national notoriety for inciting racial hatred on social media, and that followed what Axel Rudakubana had done. Actually, on the same day, she tweeted on July 29, 2024, she tweeted she was calling for mass deportation. Now, she urged her followers to, essentially create arson on the hotels that were putting up many of these migrants. She pleaded guilty to inciting racial hatred. She was sentenced in October 2024 to 31 months, 2 years and 7 months in prison. The judge noted that she intended to incite serious violence during a volatile social climate. In May 2025, she challenged her sentence, but the Court of Appeal dismissed it, ruling that the 31-month term was not manifestly excessive. She was released from HMP Peterborough on August 21st, 2025, after serving 40% of her sentence in custody. She remains on license for the remainder of her sentence. She is the wife of Raymond Connolly, a local politician who served on West Northamptonshire Council and remains on Northampton Town Council. Her case became a catalyst for debates regarding free speech and two-tier policing in the UK. It was even taken to the Senate in the US by Nigel Farage, and the people that got behind it are all kind of establishment bods like Daily Telegraph, Alison Pearson, Free Speech Union, Toby Young, and former Sun hack Dan Wootton. There was this whole idea that this was political victimhood, that she described herself as a political prisoner. She alleged she'd been manhandled while in custody. I want to know what made Lucy Connolly so special that, given the thousands, which I will talk about in a minute, the thousands of people who were arrested for social media posts, why did she become the cause celeb? Why? Because Lucy Connolly was a Psy-op. Now, by that, I don't necessarily mean that she isn't real or that she didn't serve that time. I mean that she was used as an example to wage a psychological operation against our nation. Yes, she was. And you can tell that by the type of people who backed her. And the message was, be careful what you say. We know, we've known for a long time, but the internet has got out of their control. And when I say there, I'm talking about the kind of powers that be, the globalists, the governments, their handlers, those kind of people. The internet now became this kind of wild and unwieldy animal that they could no longer, they didn't control it from the beginning. Not really. Not in the way that some people believe that they did. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to afford the sort of relationships that we had done and put the kind of information initially on the internet, which of course is all scaled back now. And you can tell how censored the internet is now, because whatever you search for, especially if you use one of the major search engines like Google, whatever you search for, they will give you an AI summary of those events. Now, those AI summaries are not necessarily real or fact-checked, but what they are is an approved narrative. The AI summary is garnered from approved websites, because so much alternative thinking has been removed from the internet now, that those are approved narratives that make up AI. And that is the first example that most people get when they search and ask for any information on the internet. So you can see what's happened. We all can. But back to Lucy Connolly. I was never a supporter of Lucy Connolly. However, I have a real problem with people being imprisoned for social media posts, especially when our government was letting rapists, muggers, violent offenders out this year because the prison was overflowing. It's ridiculous. But this was never about justice. This was about sending a message to us, the people, to back the F off. Stop questioning the powers that be. That's what happened. Christine's not on Twitter much these days. Me either. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. Calvin said, AI will never have a gut feeling. Indeed. Indeed. And the Black Eye Club, says DJ Markson. Does anybody remember this image that Dan Wootton put out of Lucy Connolly, about Lucy Connolly attacked in jail? And this was after Richard Tice of Reform had gone to visit her. And they made this big thing about how she was attacked in prison. But it was an AI generated image of her with black eyes. It was absolutely ridiculous, because the reality is, under Starmer's Fabian, protesting against injustices became a game of Russian roulette as his government sought to increasingly stop people from coming together either online or in person. That's what happened. And most of the protesters that have been targeted this year include those protesting genocide in the Middle East, those that were deemed far-right activists, and climate activists. And again, climate activism, you have to question whether that is part of the Psy-op, because we all know that the government has a huge fake climate agenda. But let me just fill you in on some of the figures about how draconian it has got to be protesting against injustices in the UK in 2025. Between July and December 2025, over 2,700 people were arrested in connection with protests opposing the ban on the group Palestine Action. That's one lot. As of December 2025, in fact, as recent as the 19th, so that's 3 days ago, approximately 254 of these individuals have already been charged under counter-terrorism legislation. The Ministry of Justice, that oversees all this, reported a 21% increase in prosecutions for public order offences in the year ending June 2025 compared to the previous year. More people than ever are being arrested, charged, convicted, and imprisoned for protesting against injustices than the year before. There is also a higher conviction rate. The overall conviction rate for cases handled by the Crown Prosecution Service, which is the body that is responsible for charging individuals, remained very high. Of the protesters that went through the hands of the CPS, 83.1% were convicted. That's significant. That's a higher conviction rate than murderers and rapists. Think about that. People protesting are more in danger on our streets than people who are deliberately harming others. We should all be concerned about Starmer's Fabian Britain. As of September 2025, 857 protesters were arrested in London under the Terrorism Act for supporting Palestine Action. The prison population was obviously deeply impacted. By June 2025, the number of prisoners serving immediate custodial sentences for public order offences had increased by 69% compared to 2024. And the official reason was this was due to ongoing disorder and protest related activities. They don't want us to protest. They absolutely don't. I'm beginning to understand that what happened during C19 was about so much more than mRNA jabs, about a cashless society, about digital ID. It was also about affecting and impacting our psychology. So we were so exhausted to keep fighting back because it all seems so bloody pointless. And it's had that impact on many people. And climate activists, again, I believe part of the Psy-op, received some of the harshest sentences known in modern British history, with a charge rate of nearly 75% of those arrested in London. And that's extraordinary. And we saw it, didn't we? And again, I felt that that was very much part of a psychological operation to stop people gathering together to protest the harms that have been done towards us. Is that true, Kenneth? Your lips are out of sync with your speech. Glitch in the matrix. It happens sometimes. It doesn't always happen for everybody. Sometimes it happens on people's individual devices. It might be your device. Remember, they are the name stealers. Yes, indeed. So, moving on. Talking about Sakia, Rodney, Starmer, who can forget this bunch? Alleged arsonists who were said to have targeted properties and a vehicle linked to Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The incidents took place in May 2025 and a trial has been scheduled for April the 27th, 2026. The three primary suspects charged in the case are Ukrainian Roma Lavrinovich, another Ukrainian national, Petro Pochinok, and a Romanian national born in the Ukraine, Stanislav Karpiak, ages 21, 34, and 26. A fourth man was arrested in June 2025 at Stansted Airport, but was subsequently released on bail. In November 2025, the three men appeared at the Old Bailey and pleaded not guilty to the charges. The case is being handled by the Metropolitan Police's Counter-Terrorism Command due to the involvement of a high-profile public figure, being the Prime Minister. This is where it gets interesting. While investigators are still exploring potential links to foreign recruitment via social media platforms like Telegram, the official motive remains unexplained. So Keir Starmer described the incidents as an attack on our democracy. Is that true, though? Or was it an attack on him, very specifically? There are lots of questions, and most of them we can't ask right now because it's a live case. But we all know that we are asking them, don't we? Yes, indeed, we do. Oh, yes, indeed, we do. How are you all, you beautiful people? How are you all? It's unbelievable to think that we take orders from a man. I can't read the rest of that. That's defamation. I can't get involved in that, but I take your point. I take your point. Some of those comments I really can't read because I'll be in a lot of trouble, but I take your point. I take your points. Of course, one of the biggest shifts that occurred in the UK this year involved the grooming gang phenomena. And to be fair, I don't like him at all, but Elon Musk shifted the grooming gang narrative in the UK at the start of the year 2025, not because he especially cares for white working class girls, the primary target of these grooming gangs, but because he has issues with immigrants and especially Muslim ones. But regardless of the motive, he kicked back into life an issue that had been kicked into the long grass. And let's talk a little bit about it. What are these grooming gangs as they've become known in the UK? Well, essentially, they are group-based child sexual exploitation cases involving perpetrators who are predominantly of Pakistani Muslim heritage. And to our shame, these grooming gangs have occurred in the UK since at least the late 1980s or early 1990s. That's an awful long time. The issue gained significant national public prominence around 2010, 2011. There were some high-profile trials. There were some media exposés, particularly concerning the abuses that took place in Rotherham and in Rochdale in the north of England. And Labour has shown some reluctance in tackling the issue of grooming gangs. And there's a reason for that. There is a reason for that. PM Starmer and much of his cabinet rode to power on the back of the Muslim vote, on the back of the migrant vote. And some Labour councillors and MPs are implicated in the cover-up of the grooming gangs scandal. That is a fact, which is why when the issue exploded again this year and the public demanded accountability, Labour was extremely reluctant to hold an inquiry, because you don't want to hold an inquiry if you might be implicated in the crime, right? Nonetheless, in 2025, the UK government eventually, and under much pressure, established an independent inquiry into grooming gangs. This followed a national audit led by Baroness Louise Casey, and it highlighted systemic failures and the need for a full investigation. Even though we had a child abuse inquiry, which had in part covered some of these grooming gangs, it was evident that it was not enough. It was not sufficient. The problem is the establishing of the inquiry, the grooming gang inquiry, faced significant controversy and delays throughout all of this year. And Baroness Casey's audit was published in June 2025. It found deep-rooted institutional failures and denial at national and local levels. It recommended a full national statutory inquiry to address the issue, noting that authorities had shied away from the ethnicity of perpetrators in some areas. And they've denied it, but it is a fact. Absolutely, unquestionably. Finally, the government accepted all 12 recommendations from Baroness Casey, including the launch of a new National Crime Agency-led policing operation. Operation Beacon Port was launched to review previously closed cases. Now, Wake Up viewers are very sussed and savvy people. We know for the most part that when they establish inquiries, it is almost always, one, to make the public feel that something is happening, and two, to solidify a narrative. So we shall see. But following Baroness Casey's report, Keir Starmer announced the creation of the independent inquiry into grooming gangs. And this month, the government announced former Children's Commissioner Anne Longfield as the chair of the inquiry. I don't know much about Anne Longfield, but I am actually very happy that one or two who were in line to be chair have pulled out of the race. And that included Jim Gamble. Never liked Jim Gamble, former cop from the Royal Ulster Constabulary, also involved in organisations for missing children, very much somebody who has promoted the Madeleine McCann was abducted narrative. Jim Gamble and I clashed very badly about 10 years ago. I had a lot of problems with Jim Gamble, including the fact that he had said previously that adults, primarily males, who are downloading images of child abuse should essentially be cared for in the community, shouldn't receive prison sentences. And then he did an incredible about turn when the whole thing came out about BBC presenter Hugh Edwards being the thing is, the thing about Hugh Edwards, even though we know all the things about him and that he was eventually convicted for the making and downloading of child abuse images, you can't actually legally call him a nonce or a paedophile, which is fairly outrageous because these people make up the market. But anyway, when that all happened around Hugh Edwards, Jim Gamble was like, this is outrageous. He needs to go to prison. Yeah, but it was people like Jim Gamble in the first place who had fought for people like Hugh Edwards not to go to prison for these things. So I definitely didn't want Jim Gamble running that inquiry. Absolutely not. And I think eventually he pulled out because there was just so much controversy around it. But some of the survivors have pulled out as well because it was becoming apparent that actually the government inquiry was about involving cops and social workers, the very organizations, people and roles that had been involved in the cover-up in the first place. Bad stuff. Bad stuff. It's all words. Starmer is about as absolutely clear as mud at midnight during a blackout. Got you. Absolutely got you. So anyway, they launched the grooming gang inquiry. We shall see what happened. Operation Beacon Port began reviewing cases between January 2010 and March 2025. They identified over 1,200 cases for potential reinvestigation. And the grooming gang convictions have continued. As one example, in June 2025, Greater Manchester Police, which was at the heart initially when Maggie Oliver, a former GMP cop, had whistleblown that Greater Manchester Police had covered up the grooming gang inquiries. But now Greater Manchester Police are at the forefront of convictions. And in fact, in June 2025, 7 men were convicted, and that was grooming that had occurred in Rochdale between 2001 and 2006. Many people hate the expression grooming gangs, and I understand why, because they aren't. Obviously, grooming gangs kind of tends to minimize what they do. What these gangs do is they get very young, vulnerable, predominantly white working class females. Many of them have gone into the care system. They pick them up, they coerce them, they bribe them, they treat them well, they take them on as these kind of like semi-girlfriends, and then they pass them around their friends while being drunk and drugged. They treat them as drug mules. It's just horrendous stuff. And this also happens to British Asian females as well. But it's really quite interesting because it's seen as such a shame for a lot of British Asian girls that they don't talk about it. So we don't get the balance of it, of what has really happened. And so we predominantly see it as white working class girls, which it actually is predominantly. But anyway, an absolute stain on our nation has been the issue of the grooming gangs, and the fact that Labour did not want to get to the bottom of it this year tells us everything we really need to know. It really does. There was also really important, because all of these things are linked. There was also increased activity in people demonstrating against immigration, or more precisely, the multitude of small boats and young fighting age men to descend on our wee island. As of yesterday, December the 21st, 2025, over 41,455 people arrived in the UK by small boats. This exceeded last year's total. The number of crossings represents a 16% increase compared to the same period in 2024. This is the second highest annual total since records began in 2018. And the fact is, rather than stopping these small boats, they are increasing. That's how you know it's an agenda supported by government, because they could stop this in a heartbeat if they really wanted to. But consecutive governments, whether Conservative, whether Labour, whether the Lib Dem Conservative coalition, none of them have stopped these small boats. And the small boats are interesting in many respects because they predominantly hold young fighting age men, which is what they've been characterized. And it's true, that is the reality. And the boats that were carrying people in 2025, on average, each boat had approximately 61 people on average. The boats were increasingly overcrowded. And actually, a single day record was set this weekend alone on Saturday, December the 20th. 803 people crossed into England in 13 boats. It just beggars belief. I find it staggering. And I talk as somebody who's always been very pro multiculturalism and remains so. But you simply cannot have unfettered access to our nation, undocumented men piling in. It's outrageous. And nearly all of the people arriving by small boats claimed asylum, which of course has led to protests all around the country. These men are being taken into hotels, into private accommodation, and latterly into army barracks. And again, government not doing anything at all to dispel the notion that they are creating an army against UK citizens. There are approximately 900 male asylum seekers who are currently being planned to house across 2 UK military sites. That is Cameron Barracks in Inverness and the Crowborough training camp in East Sussex. The initiative aims to reduce reliance on hotel accommodation, with specific plans to house 540 people at the Crowborough site. And weekly protesting has been taking place in Crowborough. I think they're on their 6th or 7th week now. And I think a lot of that is really interesting. The other sites like Napier Barracks previously housed over 300 asylum seekers at its peak. It's closing by the end of 2025, and the asylum seekers are going from Napier Barracks to Crowborough. And as of September 2025, over 36,000 asylum seekers were living in hotel accommodation. Now, just to be really clear, what do asylum seekers receive when they come to the UK? They can receive government provided accommodation. That's hotels, hostels, houses, and now army barracks. They get a weekly cash allowance of roughly, and it can be variable, of roughly £49.18 for living expenses. They get access to free NHS healthcare, and they get school education for children. They're generally banned from working. They need to report regularly, and they receive an application registration card known as an ARC. The average cost of an asylum seeker in the UK is approximately £41,000 per person annually. And that's primarily driven by the high cost of hotel accommodation. Now, the figures do vary depending on the type of accommodation provided, but I looked at recent figures, and it's really interesting. If you go from 2019 to 2014, the difference is shocking. In 2019, the cost of keeping asylum seekers per year was approximately £17,000 per asylum seeker. Well, as I say, by the time you get to up to date, it is now £41,000 a year. That difference is huge, massive. And it's just all too much for anybody. And that includes people who believe in multiculturalism. It's not okay. The people in the UK have to come first, and we have, because I don't really count myself, because I'm not on the receiving end of a lot of the kind of punishments that have taken place, such as kind of like removing winter fuel allowance for pensioners, that sort of thing. But the reality is that the British government is the biggest, fattest failure around, and has been for a long time. So it's not just a Labour thing. It's continued. And some of the worst things that happened under David Cameron and Nick Clegg. And that was when they ushered in the ideological austerity, an absolute lie, to create a several tier society, the haves and the have-nots. And so we've seen that. And so British people, English people, have been given a proper good kicking for decades now, while we have seen people coming in to the country and being given stuff that Brits aren't getting. And this is, of course, it creates animosity. And it is all by design. I think I saw somebody say it's all by design in there. And Eric, that's a good point. Failure, they haven't failed. Oh, that comment went so quickly. They've executed a plan perfectly. Now, I've interviewed a number of people about this. This is absolutely, unquestionably a plan. It is the Carle plan. We know it. Even though when you mention it on YouTube, they put a thing underneath to talk about how that's a myth. It's not a myth. And that's true as well, Aurora. And I've talked about that as well, is that no country can bring in people from outside who overtake the indigenous population, because then you lose the sense of the self of that country. And that is what has happened in England. No wonder people are hurt and angry. No wonder. They are beyond wicked. And how much does it cost to accommodate Ukrainian refugees too, Sonia? Well, they include that in all of the figure, but don't forget there's all the additional stuff that has been paid to Ukraine as well, which I started with at the start. So I can, we are, when you have people, and they're horrible people, they're rabble-rousing people who are actually far right, who are like, oh, we're going to have civil war, it's all going to kick off here and everything. I don't believe that is going to happen. And I believe what we actually need is less heat. And we need people who are not bigots, who are not fascists, who are not racist, just decent people like me, actually, like me, because I don't have an agenda, but I can clearly see that there's a problem, and I can clearly see that this has all been created. So what we actually need is to be able to diffuse the anger that has taken place. And we actually do need people to properly represent us, because I'm telling you, kids, reform or advance or any of those setups are not it. Absolutely, they are not it. Okay. But we do need people who can advance for the English people, for the British people. And that is not happening. And people just feel that they are being shat on from a great height. And you can see why. This is an awful lot of money when we are being told that we don't have any money, and we have, enormous billion-pound black holes, according to Rachel from accounts. So yeah, big problem, massive problem is unfettered migration into the UK, and must be dealt with. But you can absolutely see why people say they are creating an army against the British people. And we also know now, of course, that this whole idea that people are like conspiracy theorists and everything, that is so yesterday, because almost everything that us so-called conspiracy theorists said about C-19 has turned out to be the truth. Okay, so if people say they are creating an army against the indigenous people, I think we should allow at least for the fact that it's a possibility, especially because they're being put up in army barracks. So other key developments that took place in the UK in 2025 involved weather manipulation. So this was an interesting time, actually, because what happened was that geoengineering was finally mainstreamed. And when I say finally mainstreamed, I mean like this. They finally were forced to admit that, yes, indeed, they've been carrying out all manner of geoengineering experiments to dim the sun. This was actually in the Daily Mail. It was all over the media. And there's a number of reasons for that. They've obviously spent many years denying geoengineering for decades. And they were forced to admit it, one, because in 2025, now you may or may not know this, but this year, the UK government authorised a massive package of £56.8 million in funding through the Advanced Research and Invention Agency, known as ARIA. And it's for scientists to study techniques designed to cool the Earth. And what was shocking about this was this made the UK one of the largest global funders for geoengineering research. They had spent years denying it was happening. And these things don't just happen, today when they say it happens. They've been planning it. They had this on the government website, but yet when people were filing freedom of information requests, you had prime ministers like David Cameron saying it's not happening in the UK, but it is happening in other countries. So they had all of that as one example. And what some of it was, they said that they were proposing to experiment. So, for example, things like marine cloud brightening, MCB, stratospheric aerosol injections, SAI. And the UK government said, however, we're funding this, but we're not funding solar radiation management. I think they're lying. And of course, what happened was because the government were forced to admit that they were doing all this massive funding, that then meant that their friends in the media would then need to report on it. That's why it happened. That's the only reason why it happens, because it all became too big and they couldn't manage it anymore and they had to admit it. And so all these newspapers that had called us all manner of names were finally forced to admit that this was in fact happening. But they portrayed it as if it was happening in the future rather than it's been happening since at least the 1950s. Let me have some water. It's been happening a long time. Thank you, Randy. Yes, Mrs. Skeptic, we're on to a new topic. We're reviewing 2025, so I'm going to go from one topic to another. Yes, indeed. Deny, obfuscate, bamboozle, says Dilip. That's right, Mr. Dunham. Even Bill Gates apologized at the White House. And solar panels then dim the bloody sun. Ingenious. I don't know about any of you, right? But it's not really an aside. It is sort of all part of it, obviously, because we've all been dragged into this climate change hoax. Okay. And you have in like UK government, you have like Ed Miliband. And he's really supported by all of these people who are very much involved in the green initiative and are invested in it. It hurts me when I'm driving in the countryside and rather than just seeing fields, I see pain upon pain upon pain of solar panels. That hurts me. Don't want to see that stuff. Stephen, electric cars, I reported on this recently, are the leading cause of fires in the UK and in London. Several fires a day in London. Rachel, spot on. And then they gaslit everyone by saying they never denied it. Exactly that. And we, of course, around here, we regularly, didn't we? We've regularly covered the issue of geoengineering because it's important too. Let me just see if I can bring in a typical image that we would have used. Let me just bear with me a little. There's the problem about StreamYard is you can only put like 10 images on at a time, which is a pain in the butt, frankly, but you know, we'll get there. So I still don't know how anybody can look at a sky like that and say this is perfectly normal and this is perfectly natural. That is a real picture. And in June of this year, on the summer solstice, myself and a number of people got together at Marble Arch in London, led by Matt Landman, who had made the documentary Franken Skies, and we protested against geoengineering. And what was interesting was that was on the Saturday, on the summer solstice. And then 2 days later on the Monday, they had a geoengineering debate in Parliament because it's past the 100,000. It's all, I mean, people who watch Wake Up know that I think petitions and the debating of them now are just a crock. It's just to mislead people, to make people believe something is happening. And I'm sorry, because I know that there are people out there who really believe that petitions are going to make the change, but they actually don't. And it's very rare when a petition does. And the only good thing about petition is it raises awareness about a subject. But what is the use of raising awareness about a subject for people to then think that it's taken care of so they don't then have to take other proper activism actions in order to be able to stop that thing happening? And I just think that petitions are a fop. And now this whole idea that once they get past 100,000, they are then eligible for government debates. Well, 5 or 6 people, if that, turn up at these debates and then it's done. And it makes it look as if the government have listened to us when they haven't. So I really think we as a people need to think about how we intend to do proper activism in 2026. And it can't involve petitions because they go nowhere fast. They go nowhere fast. And so we need to do more about it. Yes, we do. Apathy has always been the main problem, and people not wanting to face what is happening, says Jan. It's true, Jan. And I think what also has happened after 2020 is people have become so kind of reluctant to put their head above the parapet. And also in the last year, because of the attacks on freedom of speech in this country, one of the worst. I mean, literally one of the worst around the world. There was a poll, and we are now within the top 5 of countries with the most oppressive legislation against free speech. It says so much. And I think people are just so exhausted about standing up to be counted. Yes, Jacqueline, Anthony Webber. Anthony Webber has been a regular contributor around here, and he loves his petitions. Anthony and I have had debates about the validity or otherwise of petitions, but again, they do raise awareness of that. I get. British are too soft. says Essa. Do you think so? Strikes is the only way, says M. Grand rising to you. Downtrodden is the word, says Markuson. And I think that's what's happened. I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of people just aren't feeling Christmas this year. And I think that is this slow erosion of us as people. Just kind of like exhausting us. We're exhausted. People are exhausted. But don't worry, we will get it back. We absolutely will. So let us not forget, by the way, because this feeds into it, that while government were cutting things like winter fuel allowance for pensioners and failing to protect the people of our nation against the greedy energy giants and food manufacturers, they continued to perpetuate the big climate hoax and spend our money like it was going out of fashion. I'm going to give you some amounts that have been spent on the Green Initiative and the hoax this year. So, international climate finance up to 2025 for the period last 4 years, 11.6 billion has been spent by the UK. And the international climate finance is a sort of coalition of people. It just goes into like a drain, obviously. But 11.6 billion has been sent to them. And that is to take care of climate issues around the world. Then you have the domestic initiatives. And the spending review and autumn budget in November 2025 outlined major investment in several domestic climate related areas. So what you had was, for example, the Clean Energy and Infrastructure Initiative, which was given 63 billion in capital funding to support clean energy, climate and nature investment. Well, we've seen it. Our farms are being sold. They are being returned to just like blots on the landscape of solar panels. They are doing these rewilding initiatives where farmers are incentivized by giving money to leave parts of their land alone. All of this stuff is taking place. Boop says boycott the supermarkets. Well, that's easier said than done, isn't it? And this is the problem. We actually do need a proper alternative. We need an alternative world. That's what we need, because the system has become all powerful, certainly with the digitalization of everything. We also have spent 2.6 billion in capital investment, which has been set aside to decarbonize transport, including funding for electric vehicle infrastructure and sustainable aviation fuel. Well, go back to what I just said, and that is a leading cause of fires in London are electric scooters and electric vehicles. But they are going to be funding more. And obviously fairly hilarious, because what we had in London was the ULEZ, which is the expanded initiative, where initially it used to be central London. Boris Johnson brought it in when he was a mayor, and it used to be central London, congestion charge zone. I think it was originally like 12.50 or something. Can't remember it exactly now. It goes back a little way, but it was around that. And then Sadiq Khan came in as mayor, and he continued the initiative to expand the ULEZ, ultra low emission zone, which essentially means if your car is not ULEZ compliant, you have to pay each day for some people to go outside of their gate, to drive outside of their gate. So that's kind of like if you, I mean, they're okay with petrol vehicles, more recent petrol vehicles. But what was funny about this was electric vehicles were exempt. And now from January, Sadiq Khan has announced that electric vehicles will be paying the ULEZ. And I don't feel sorry for people with electric vehicles. No, I don't. They've been part of the problem. They bought into this whole idea that they were creating this clean, green, lean environment, and they weren't going to be taxed or penalized in the same way as the rest of us plebs with our petrol vehicles or diesel vehicles. And actually, no, it is the ultimate bait and switch. Sadiq Khan made a big thing about electric vehicles being so compliant they wouldn't need to be covered, but it's not true. From January, that will all change. Reba, we did all say it would happen. We did. Absolutely, we did. What's that? Let me just see. I've done it. Shug was charged £16 in 2009 for a wee Clio, drove to London for a poker tournament, 6-hour drive and got knocked out in 20 minutes with aces. Great. And no, Greg, ULEZ was never about clean air. And Sadiq Khan, because he is a major eco-fascist and also the co-chair of C40 Cities, which is mayors all around the world, and their aim is to, obviously put this green agenda in all around the world. But Sadiq Khan is an unconscionable individual, and he used the death of a little girl in order to be able to push through ULEZ. And this little girl lived along the, I think, North Circular or South Circular, very highly congested, busy road. And this little girl died of asthma, and they related it to the dirty air. Well, London does have, highly dirty air at times, but other times it doesn't. But the point is that ULEZ, as somebody said in the comments, was never, ever about clean air, because the reality is you can still drive in London any vehicle as long as you can afford to. So it was always about creating a society that would eventually see people without their cars, because cars would become unaffordable for most people to drive. That is the reality. That is reality. And what about the tube? The tube is outrageous. We've covered that as well, King. Again, it has never been about clean air. This has always been about creating a several tier society, as well as taxing the hell out of us. ULEZ has been incredibly profitable, a multi-million pound, actually heading into billions now. It's incredible, incredibly profitable. So, Short Order Cook said, I think it's disgusting what they've done to the electric vehicle owners. And I hate electric vehicles. I agree. They want to stop all movement. This is true. And Gina said, it feels like they want to stop us from traveling, pricing us out the market under the umbrella of climate cobblers. All true. We know it's true. We had Paul Burgess on last week, and he was talking, because obviously they're very keen now on banning open fires and wood burners and making up all manner of unconscionable lies that will support them in order to be able to do it. And we had Paul Burgess on, and he just lit the torch paper to the lies. We want to stop them. Where does the money go, says Issa? Well, that is the never-ending question, right? That's the never-ending question. Happy solstice to you, Summer Breeze. Of course, it winter solstice in Northern Hemisphere yesterday. Shortest day of the year yesterday. Right. What else has been happening in the UK? Well, of course, it would be utterly remiss of me not to mention this, because it's impacted so many people. In 2025, the issue of legalizing and legitimizing assisted suicide began a new journey into law. And it had previously been on the table, but they hadn't managed to get it into law. And so they now renamed it as the Terminally Ill Adults End of Life Bill. And it passed a historic House of Commons vote it was on June the 20th, 2025, day before the summer solstice, to legalize assisted suicide for terminally ill adults with 6 months left to live. The bill was introduced by Labour MP Kim Ledbetter. I cannot bear this individual. I'm very straight about this. She is the sister of Joe Cox, the slain Labour MP. Kim Ledbetter got in on a sympathy vote because people felt very, very sorry for her. And on her first day in the House of Parliament, her parents came and had a meeting with Keir Starmer. It was almost certainly always designed that she would lead a bill like this, an unpopular bill like this, and lead it she has, to her credit, with her very weird and animated face. She's also been supported by celebrities like Esther Ranson, who has called for the assisted dying bill to go through. There has been a number of oppositions and amendments. The troubling thing is that it's now in the Lords. There's intense debate which continues regarding safeguards. Some of the things that the people pushing it wanted. She's also backed by Lord Charlie Faulkner, Tony Blair's former flatmate, and he was at one stage I think Justice Secretary or in that role anyway. So There's some quite big backers behind this bill. They definitely want it pushed through. If approved by the Lords, implementation, they say, could take up to 4 years, potentially making it available around 2029, 2030. There's that year again. There's a separate bill for assisted dying in Scotland, which also passed its initial voting stages in 2025. There has been lots of money pumped into this campaign. The Dignity in Dying campaign is super well funded. And as I say, you have the celeb backing from people like former TV presenter Esther Ranson, who is regularly trotted out to tell us that if this is not made into law, then she's going to die a miserable death. And she's now signed up to go out to Zurich where she can legally die. She also told us that she was having an early Christmas this year because she didn't know if she was going to last it. All very emotive stuff to force people into backing this, but a lot of us have a real problem with it. I didn't used to so much because I used to be of the mind that if I were in that situation, I might want to take that route, right? If I'd had an accident, if I was unable to walk or any of those things, I might want to take that route, and I wouldn't want my loved ones penalized for assisting me. And I have had people write in who have been unhappy with my stance about this. And see how it's going in Canada. Actually, Carle, I did read a letter recently from a Canadian viewer, and she was very upset with me about some of the things that I'd said about Canada. And she said, actually, she knew people, including her own sister, who had wanted it, and that it wasn't necessarily as bad as I was portraying it. But my problem is, going back again to what we've experienced over the last 5 years, we simply cannot trust the people in power to dispense anything medical to us, anything. They do not have our best interests at heart. We know that. So previously, I was very much of the mind of, yeah, I get it. You know, perhaps this is what we should allow. Would I want that? And now I'm absolutely of the mind that no, we cannot trust the people who are running the show to be in charge of our fate, because it will start to come down to money. They've even debated it in Parliament. They've talked about how some people going to their doctors, you know, the doctors would be allowed to raise this issue if, for example, the person involved felt a burden on their loved ones, maybe financially or time. This is insane stuff. Also, people with mental health issues. Somebody with a mental health issue might think, I want to go today and tomorrow I want to stay here forever. That's how quickly things can change for people with mental health issues. So all of those things are really problematic. This also goes back to the whole kind of obvious horrible expression, but I think it sums it up, the whole useless eaters idea. And that is, I do truly believe that this will be used against sick and disabled people. We've seen the savage attacks on sick and disabled people in this country since at least 2010. Absolutely unconscionable savage attacks on some of our most vulnerable children, elderly, sick and disabled. And it really concerns me deeply that they would use this, were it to come into law, to dispense with people who were considered a burden on the state. I don't trust them with anything. They introduced experimental jabs en masse. They locked us down. They used our money to terrorize us and tell us that we should be scared of something that we could neither see or feel. So I don't trust the people who are behind this and pushing this. Not at all. I don't trust them. It is the birthday of Lisa Sturley. Happy birthday tomorrow, Lisa. Happy birthday. These are facts, right? These are absolute facts. We must never forget that, or what happened in the care homes. It's called satanic, says Robert, and it's not over till we see justice. That is the reality. Obviously, we talked about Operation Taller a couple of weeks ago. Catherine McBean. Operation Taller appears to be some national stand-down command where the police were told not to take reports of vaccine injury. That appears to be a national directive in the UK. Until we get justice, there is no peace. That is the reality. Wakening. I do my best. I do my best. They are now pushing the superflu. They are indeed. And for children, right? And for children. Please protect your children, people. one of my favorite pieces of merchandise to emerge from the C19 era was the brilliant Bob Moran image of the mother stood in front of the child as the kind of demon is coming at them. I think that is just such a profound image. So, you know, we have to be careful. We have to be careful. And I asked this, where would this year be? I mean, what kind of review would it be without mention of the world's most famous missing child, Madeleine McCann? What a bunch of frauds that have used her name this year. And as one example, I use that image there of her with Christian Bruckner, not because I believe they are attached in any way, but because mass media have made the public believe they are attached in some way. Christian Bruckner, of course, a German citizen who spent some time in Portugal, became the prime suspect of abducting Madeleine in 2020. He was released from prison in Germany in September 2025 after serving a 7-year sentence. Although German police and media made him the prime suspect, as I say, in 2020, neither have been able to pin the disappearance of Madeleine on his back, despite some sterling effort to do so. And German prosecutor Hans Wolters has as pathetic and embarrassing as you can get when it comes to law. And Bruckner, in October, was cleared of a series of charges after a non-jury trial in Germany in which a judge criticised the prosecution's decision to publicly link him to Madeleine's case, and quite rightly so, because the reality is that Hans Wolters, for whatever reason, he decided that Christian Bruckner was the main suspect, and he set out to prove that hypothesis. And rather than keeping an open mind, which you should in an investigation, everything was confirmation bias for him. And so German police, they carried out new unsuccessful searches in Portugal in June 2025 to no avail. And it's been an absolute funding dud for us poor beleaguered Brits. For goodness sake, we are still funding the ridiculous Scotland Yard investigation, Operation Grange, which is ongoing and has spent in excess of £14 million for a crime that didn't happen in this country. And on a disappearance that many of us believe the child is no longer alive. Then what you had also this year regarding Madeleine was the Portuguese police made an apology in October 2025, an official apology to the McCann family for the handling of the initial investigation. Well, what a crock that is, because the initial investigation in Portugal is the only one that has stood the test of time. And the initial investigation, led by coordinator Gonzalo Amaral, who of course was removed from the case. The British Prime Minister at the time, Gordon Brown, knew Amaral was getting fired before Amaral knew. Okay, absolute state intervention on this case, which I've talked about many times. I've made 2 documentaries. You've heard it. You know what I'm talking about. But the reality is it was Gonzalo Amaral's investigation, which, as I say, is the only one that stood the test of time. And they brought in cadaver dogs, and cadaver dogs detected blood spats behind the sofa of the apartment that Madeleine had said to have gone missing from. There was a DNA correlation with the McCanns. It turned out nobody had died in that apartment. What was also interesting was the dogs also alerted on her toys in the holiday apartment. The dogs did not alert in the apartment of the friends that with the McCanns when they were on holiday in May 2007. So I think those things are very interesting. That's the initial investigation. The initial investigation concluded that Madeleine had died in apartment 5A. And the abduction narrative had been set. But now the Portuguese police have issued an apology to the McCanns. Who is sick and tired of this? And also the media, geez, what an absolute shower. Appalling, of course. You had both The Sun and Channel 4 this year who came together to produce a dud of a documentary with the aim of making people believe that Christian Bruckner remained the prime suspect. He does, but only in their eyes. They are invested in the lie that Madeleine was abducted, all of them. And they are invested because The Sun pushed for Operation Grange. So imagine if Operation Grange was found to be a dud, the backlash on the Sun, as if the Sun can even afford another backlash from British people, right? Then you had Channel 4, who had previously carried out a reconstruction, which was more like some kind of fictionalized account of what took place. And that was with like private contractors. The McCanns and their friends have never done an actual police reconstruction, which is kind of weird when you expect people all around the world to spend millions looking for your missing daughter, but you haven't even done the bare necessity in order to be able to find her. And as I say, media has ever been pretty appalling this year regarding Madeleine McCann. New theories, madness, so much madness to emerge. There's an old story that did the rounds that they attempted to resurrect, the idea that Madeleine had left the holiday apartment to look for her parents, then fell into an accident or was knocked over by someone who panicked and disposed of her body. That was put forward in the past. There's no evidence to support that theory, but that was rejuvenated again this year. Some suggested that Madeleine had fallen down in roadworks and had been covered up. Poor Madeleine. Poor Madeleine. This is what happens when, you know what they say, right? Tell a lie and make it big. That's Madeleine McCann. Tell a lie and make it big. And if that was not enough, right, we all had to deal with the delusional Julia Wandel, who claimed to be Madeleine McCann and who was sentenced to 6 months in prison in November 2025 for stalking the McCann family. DNA tests proved that she was not Madeleine. She's a Polish national. She looks the spitting image of her mother, who is not Kate McCann. And the Julia Wandel, that was a warning shot. That was a warning shot from the establishment, and that was to stop us talking. In fact, out of nowhere last week, when I was in the High Court, the judge started talking about the McCann case in reference to me, even though that was not why I was there. So I do believe absolutely that Madeleine McCann and the Julia Wandel case was absolutely used to send a shot across the bow for people like me who talk about this case and refuse to let it lie. And I can't let it lie because not only do I believe that Madeleine McCann has never seen justice, but also we, the British taxpayers, have been pulled into a massive lie to keep the lie going. And Julia Wandel is part of that. She's part of that lie because her very existence makes people believe that Madeleine is still alive. And there were some very irresponsible podcasters who pushed her, including Sean Atwood, and so much weird stuff around Sean Atwood that I have unpacked before. And I will go into in more depth because, well, let's just say that during the case with Julia Wandel, I was approached by the police to do with Sean Atwood, and I've promised that I will do a deep dive investigation, but I'm still waiting for documents from the police in order to be able to evidence what it is I'm saying. But it involves Sean Atwood, the biggest pusher of the Julia Wandel lie, the biggest pusher. And the reality is Operation Grange must end. We all know that because the answer is closer to home. Kate and Jerry McCann must be held accountable for the disappearance of their daughter and the amount of money that British taxpayers have paid to find her. But that is not happening anytime soon because only this month, December 2025, Jerry McCann, who at the very least neglected his 3 children to such an extent that one went missing, and that's according to their own official narrative. But yet again, he was given a BBC Radio 4 microphone to spout off about how his family were monstered and about how press regulation needs to be tightened. The last time I recall Jerry McCann being on Radio 4 was the day that Brenda Leyland was doorstepped by Sky News. Brenda Leyland, who was asking questions on social media about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, she was doorstepped by establishment hack Martin Brunt and played on rotation 24/7, really horrendous stuff. But Jerry McCann was also given the microphone on BBC Radio 4 on the same day in which he called for people like Brenda to be made an example of. Well, 2 days later, Brenda Leyland was found dead in a Leicester hotel. And the coroner ruled that she'd taken her own life. It was just questions. But the bottom line is Jerry McCann displays such insufferable arrogance. You go on holiday, you neglect your kids, you cost British taxpayers millions to look for the missing child that you should have been taking better care of, and you're still complaining? You want us to shut the F up? That's what he wants us to do. That's what he wants us to do. He's pushing for a Leveson too. We had the Leveson inquiry, which was an inquiry into media culture and ethics. And it was really about how so many members of parliament had been bought by the press. And it led to the forming of the press regulator IPSO. But people like Jerry McCann and people like Hugh Grant, and people like Caroline Flaxman, they want a Leveson too. They want to clamp down on media. But you see, what they would almost certainly do is they would extend it out to like social media. British media, I mean, honestly, it's not a free press anyway. It's absolutely bought and sold. You only have to look at the last 5 years to know that. Simple stuff, simple stuff. So this is fairly outrageous. We shouldn't be supporting this. Operation Grange has to end. We need full accountability. Full accountability. And we are not going to find that out of the mouth of Jerry McCann, where he is calling for further censorship. And he wants further censorship because they want us to stop asking questions about what happened to your daughter, Jerry. That's what they want us to do. And I, for one, will not do that. Absolutely, unquestionably, no, not happening. Right. And also, I love this. 2025 was unquestionably the year when, come on, we got to face it. The British royalty is dead in the water. It is not popular. And media, once again, are complicit in making out it is, because media is the establishment and it upholds the status quo, which benefits the people within that mainstream media. But it was at the June Trooping the Colours that I knew the royals were done and they could no longer hide it. Even the media couldn't hide it. And I don't know if you can see this imagery, but the imagery of them all on the balcony, the royal balcony, was the one that was shared far and wide. And the image next to it is what the mall looked like while they were on the balcony. And it is half empty. Not at all. It's half empty. And that is the reality. And this was the main royal event, the Trooping the Colours, June 2025. And it also marked King Charles III's 76th official birthday with a parade, military pageant and balcony appearance. And the place was half empty. Nobody cares. The only way that royalty still exists is because media tries to convince us in the UK that royalty is still popular, and it's not. It's absolutely not. Come on, we're still not clear what happened about their cancer treatment. Was Kate precancerous? Did she have cancer? According to her, she received treatment at Royal Marsden Hospital. Then there was Charles. He hasn't told us much about his treatment, but Charles is a man who likes alternative measures. So chances are he's not going to subject himself to the same kind of treatment that actually hurts people, right? Yes, absolute. SMG says Dan Wootton constantly pushes them. Yes, he does. Dan Wootton upholds the royal family. He's not an alternative voice. But do you remember when the Queen died and somebody captured Dan Wootton doing repeat takes of him pretending to grieve and putting flowers outside Buckingham Palace? That's the kind of arsewipe that Dan Wootton is. Oh, yes. Eric said, popular as a fart in a lift. Yes. They're parasites. Yes. And we're all sick and tired of it. But this year we saw it. And I did a deep dive into the royals, which covered all areas, including their kind of bloodthirstiness, including how many paedophiles are around them, historically so, and present day. And if I haven't already put the links in the description, I will. So there you go. I think the thing is that we're living in a time now where they know the media have lost grip. They've completely lost grip because we have all these other avenues and outlets for sharing information and news. Yes, everyone's over it now. Queenie isn't here, hasn't got the same feel, says Marco. And that is, yes, David, the crown of stolen gems, indeed. And we have to be very clear that what they want to do now, obviously, is they want William and Kate to be relatable, as if they're one of us. They're not one of us. They never have to worry about balancing the bills or which bill they're going to pay or anything like that, or heating their homes, nothing like that. In fact, they've moved into their forever home and they've had to uproot people from their actual homes. So this is not a relatable stuff, but they want us to believe that these are people who have takeaway pizza and chill out watching Strictly Come Dancing. There was even a message from Queen Camilla. Who can call her Queen Camilla? I will always see Camilla as the one who was involved with Charles while he was married to Diana. And most people do. That is the reality. No matter, they tried to rebrand her as some sort of soft-hearted individual. Now, the thing is that Camilla is much harder than Diana. And they tried to make Camilla like a kind of Queen of Hearts type of thing. And Diana was naturally that way. She was naturally empathetic. Camilla isn't. Camilla is somebody who, like Charles, is insufferably entitled and believes that essentially that we're all beneath them. But I ain't beneath no one who's like that. Never, ever, ever. Mistress Camilla, says M, a prayer at Christmas for peace in mind, love in the heart, and light to guide onward, forward. Yes, Kenneth, that's beautiful. Rest in peace, lovely Diana, says Vanessa. Well, Diana also obviously came with all of her problems as well, but she was a thorn in the side of the royal family because she was exposing them. I mean, that time that she gave the interview to the BBC was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. All related. F them, I see. Queen consort, not queen. Right, Jan, got you. Absolutely got you. And we cannot forget the issue of miscarriages of justice because it's a big one, absolute big one. In the UK, for example, in 2025, we had Peter Sullivan. He was recognised in May 2025 as the victim of the longest miscarriage of justice in English history. Let me see if I can just bring up some images here. And of who I want to talk about. Let's and the thing about miscarriages of justice, and it's really important because it could be any of us. It really could be any of us. And so we've had, over the last few years, we've had the Post Office Horizon scandal. That was absolutely outrageous, described as the most widespread miscarriage of justice in British history. Over 700 sub-postmasters were wrongly prosecuted between 1999 and 2015 due to faulting accounting software. Now, that is the official reason, but actually what was also happening was these poor sub-postmasters, they were having their accounts tampered with at the main base, which I think was in Hertfordshire, at the software base. So pretty awful stuff in terms of the post office. And it's taken decades for that to be realized, that the post office were implicated. Really bad. And somebody killed themselves. Somebody walked in front of a bus. These sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses. Absolute heinous stuff. Then we had the high-profile miscarriage of justice of Andrew Malkinson. He was actually exonerated in 2023. He had spent 17 years inside after being wrongfully imprisoned for rape. His case triggered significant inquiries into the handling of appeals and DNA evidence. But the problem is we are dealing with the CCRC, the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which is supposed to be an independent body which was established in 1997. And the idea was to investigate suspected miscarriages of justice in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. It's said to review over 1,500 cases annually, and it is the CCRC that has the power to refer potential miscarriages of justice back to the Court of Appeal if new evidence or arguments emerge. And there's some really interesting stuff, of course. There are a number of reasons why miscarriages of justice happen. It can be a failure to disclose vital evidence, which happens in a lot of cases. And that's often by the prosecutors, the police involved. Police misconduct is a huge problem when it comes to miscarriages of justice. You have, for example, fabricated confessions or evidence, such as those linked to the corrupt officer Derek Ridgewell, like the Stockwell 6 and the Oval 4 as one example. Then you have human error. You can have biased investigations, unreliable eyewitness testimony, false confessions from vulnerable suspects. We see it over and over again. And at Wake Up, we have supported a number of cases that I believe have the potential to be unsafe convictions and therefore miscarriages of justice. And one of them includes this young woman, Lucy Letby. In March, I did a live Wake Up outside Liverpool Town Hall. Liverpool Town Hall is where the Lucy Letby inquiry, the Thirlwell inquiry, was taking place. Lucy Letby, a English nurse, was convicted of murdering 7 babies and convicted of the attempted murder of a further 7 babies. In 2025, there have been numerous developments to do with Lucy Letby, involving an application to the CCRC based on new expert evidence challenging her convictions. Ongoing police investigations into further potential charges are also taking place, and corporate manslaughter. And there's the continuation of the statutory public inquiry. And those were the kind of key developments of 2025 regarding Lucy Letby. But I just want to break it down slightly. And that is in February 2025. Lucy Letby's legal team submitted a preliminary application to the CCRC. This application was supported by a report from a panel of 14 international medical experts who concluded there was no medical evidence of deliberate harm in any of the cases, suggesting natural causes or poor medical care. And the CCRC began its assessment, and a process is expected to take about a year. That expert panel, chaired by Dr. Shu Lee, presented findings which suggested very serious flaws in the prosecution's use and interpretation of medical evidence during the trial. And the statutory Thirlwell inquiry continued to hear evidence throughout the year, despite very serious concerns that were being registered about the safety or otherwise of the conviction against Lucy Letby. And there was a request to pause the inquiry pending the CCRC review, and that was rejected this year. And the final report of the Thirlwell inquiry is expected in early 2026. But again, it is about solidifying an official narrative. There have been further police investigations. Cheshire Police continued investigations into other baby deaths and non-fatal collapses that were not included in the original trial. And in July 2025, a file of evidence was passed to the CPS for consideration of further charges against Lucy. But then there was also some other interesting developments. There was the arrest of former hospital managers at the hospital that Lucy was said to have harmed these babies. In July 2025, 3 former senior managers were arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter as part of a separate police investigation into the corporate response to what had taken place. They were later released on bail. But this has been really interesting, this case. I have not seen in decades, actually, if ever, people with reputations to lose being prepared to put their head above the parapet and say, this is a miscarriage of justice. I've seen political voices. I've seen medical voices. I mean, people who have something to lose. And they've called for a re-examination based on the new expert opinions. The problem is the state does not like admitting it made a mistake. The CCRC has been shown to be not fit for purpose. It almost certainly needs to be sort of raised to the ground and started again with different intentions, because it is truly problematic. Even when it's given new evidence, as was shown with Andrew Malkinson as one example, it doesn't want to look at it, claims it isn't new evidence. Criminal justice system in total disrepute over the Letby case, says Steve. So many failings by the General Medical Council allowed Shipman to go on killing. Yes, indeed. Indeed. I'm of the mind, and having looked at this case now, I'm of the mind that Lucy Letby was a scapegoat for NHS failings. I'm of the mind that that is the case, that that's what happened. And how very convenient. Let Lucy be let. Oh, what's that? Medics are infamous for closing ranks. What's this? This will sound harsh, says Mrs. Skeptic, but if hospitals owned up to failure, treated parents with delicate and sensitive, providing medical evidence of their failures and compensation given. Very good point there. Have you ever read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell? Malcolm Gladwell in The Tipping Point talks about how the vast majority of medical negligence claims came about as a result of doctors being hostile and not being prepared to admit error. That many of the people who ended up taking action was because they were faced with this stone wall of people saying, nah, didn't happen like that. And there's a lot to be said for the medical profession admitting it makes mistakes. People have less of a problem when human error or mistakes are admitted. We have a big problem when a cover-up appears to have taken place and one person is scapegoated for it. They never actually seem to cure anything. Yes, they're not there to cure. You know that, Shug. You know that. The whole point, obviously, about big pharma drugs is to create customers, not cures. We know that, don't we? Here's another one that I consider to be a significantly potential miscarriage of justice, although less popular than Lucy Letby, and less popular than Lucy Letby in part because both of them heavily demonized in the media. Jeremy Bamber has been significantly demonized in a series of docudramas as well, which has solidified this idea in the public's mind that he was responsible for the White House Farm murders in 1985, the murder of his dad, mum, sister, and twin nephews. And this year, the brilliant investigative series by the New Yorker's Heidi Blake, I think, was really eye-opening, and it does contain new information. There was this incredible admission which she'd got on tape of a call handler cop who had a call inside White House Farm on the morning of that murder, and he said there were people moving around in White House Farm. Well, that immediately means it's impossible that it could have been Jeremy Bamber, because at the time the call handler said that happened, Jeremy Bamber was outside with the police and had been for hours. And so very significant, new evidence there. But in 2025, the CCRC refused to refer Jeremy Bamber's murder convictions back to the Court of Appeal, rejecting 4 of 10 grounds. And I think it's really bad. 6 remaining grounds submitted by Bamber's legal team continue to be under review. And they do have a fundraiser. You can find it on Bamber Tweets, on X, Jeremy Bamber campaign, and they're trying to get money together because they want to get back to the Court of Appeal. And it's very, very difficult, extremely difficult. I get it. But the New Yorker highly recommend that investigation. That is investigative journalism at its very best. And I mean, it simply highlighted potential new evidence, and that included audio footage. And what was curious was that the call handler had told Heidi Blake one thing, told the police another thing, and then died after he'd told Heidi Blake what he had. But that all should be part of the review. All of it should. And yes, exactly. Absolutely. So, and then there was a third one, which was Clive Freeman, which we have also covered. Clive Freeman, he was originally convicted in 1989 for the murder of Alexander Hardy, but it absolutely appears now that no crime actually took place, that Alexander died of natural causes. And Clive Freeman has now been inside for 37 years for a crime that he and a body of experts argue may never have happened. But the good news is in August 2025, Clive Freeman, the CCRC rather, referred Clive Freeman's convictions to the Court of Appeal. So that could be interesting. Having said that, the referral to the Court of Appeal marks the 6th time that Clive Freeman has applied to the CCRC, with the previous 5 convictions being rejected. And who knows? I wish him the very best. I really do. Very problematic stuff. British justice is problematic. And as I say, part of the problem is that when the state makes a mistake, it doesn't want to admit it's made a mistake. 37 years. Yes, absolutely. Well, Kevin, there was I mean, you may not know the full story of it, but Alexander Hardy was what they called a vagrant, had some drinking issues, and it was possible that an accident occurred, a fire accident occurred. So that's sort of part of the story. Humphrey says, spent his life locked up for nothing. British justice is an moron rather. But I take your point, Kevin, just based on the surface of it, on the face of it, you go, wait, what's that? Right. What else am I bringing in here? Let's have a look. I think, oh, no, that's not what I'm looking for. A year of high-profile charges, convictions, and court cases, of course. We've had British DJ Tim Westwood. I don't know if any of you, I mean, lots of you know who he is, but some of our overseas viewers might not know who he is. And let's just bring that in. Let's just bring that image in. There he is. This is an image of two former BBC DJs and presenters, Tim Westwood and Russell Brand. In this year, Tim Westwood was formally charged by the CPS with 15 sexual offences involving 7 women spanning the period from 1983 to 2016. The charges include 4 counts of rape, 9 counts of indecent assault, 2 counts of sexual assault. He appeared in court in November and December 2025, where he entered a plea of not guilty to all charges. Westwood was granted conditional bail until his trial, which is provisionally scheduled to begin in January 2027. Then you have Russell Brand. Russell Brand was charged with multiple sexual offences in April 2025 following a police investigation that began after a media investigation in September 2023. The charges relate to 4 women and cover alleged incidents between 1999 and 2005. Brand appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court in May 2025 and subsequently at Southwark Crown Court, where he pleaded not guilty to all charges. He was granted a conditional bail, and his criminal trial is scheduled to begin in June 2026. The BBC had previously issued apologies related to the handling of complaints during Westwood's and Brand's time at the corporation. And again, these two are live cases, so I cannot say very much at all other than to acknowledge they are ongoing. And probably the highest profile kind of like celebrity case of the year was almost certainly Sean Puff Daddy Combs. And Diddy, as he's latterly been known. And the bad boy himself, he runs a company called Bad Boy. Combs' criminal trial began on May the 5th, 2025 in New York. And over 8 weeks, the court heard testimony from 34 witnesses, including ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura and a second anonymous victim known as Jane, who detailed years of physical and sexual abuse. On July the 2nd, 2025, a jury delivered a very split verdict. Combs was found guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. However, he was acquitted of the most severe charges of racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking, which could have carried a life sentence if he had been convicted of those. And on October the 3rd, 2025, Combs was sentenced to 4 years and 2 months, which amounted to 50 months in federal prison. He received credit for approximately 13 months already served in jail since his arrest in late 2024. The judge also imposed a financial penalty of $500,000 on him, which was the maximum amount allowed under the law. As of December 2025, Combs is serving his sentence at the Federal Correction Institution at Fort Dix in New Jersey. We've seen some pictures that have been leaked out, looking very comfortable there. But then he's surrounded by men. I'm sure he is. And his projected release date is May 2028. Combs' legal team have filed motions to appeal both his conviction and the length of his sentence. And there's a new investigation that is now ongoing. In November 2025, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department announced it was investigating a new sexual battery allegation against him stemming from a 2020 incident. Then there's this plethora of civil lawsuits that he's been hit with throughout 2025, dozens of additional civil lawsuits filed against him, total number of complaints exceeding 70 by October 2025. These suits involve allegations of assault, drugging, misconduct dating back decades. Then, of course, there was 50 Cent's damning Netflix documentary, which I reviewed last week. And if I haven't already put a link in the description, I will. And 50 Cent, another rapper, arch enemy of Sean Combs, has been for a very long time. He was the executive producer. And what the Netflix documentary alleges is so much more than what took place in that court case. And I've said all along that the court case was just rubbish. The prosecution was really, really poor. It was really difficult for people to feel sympathy with the women because the women were portrayed as women who wanted to be famous, and they put up with a lot of his bad treatment. And Cassie Ventura appeared to be instigating a lot of the treatment, a lot of like hiring the prostitutes and all kind of stuff like that. Cassie Ventura, of course, had been his long-term girlfriend. And very famously, there was that video that was released where he was dragging her along a hospital corridor. And that's really what kicked off the criminal charges as well. But essentially, the Netflix documentary is essentially alleging that Sean Combs was involved in the shooting of Tupac Shakur and the subsequent murder of him, as well as the murder of Biggie Smalls, who was signed to Sean Combs' label. And it was quite astonishing. I mean, Combs' team sent cease and desist, but it still seems to be there. And diddly squat, says Eric. Oops, what's that? Many succumb to the temptations of mammon, the evil love of money. Yes. What's normal? Absolutely. It's not just money. It's money, power, influence, fame. All these things are just an aphrodisiac for some people. I have some competition prizes, by the way. Let me get to them. Right now. I see we're approaching 11 o'clock. I've still got plenty to do. So we're going to be going on a bit longer today because why not? It's our last day of the wake up term, right? So competition prize. Let's bring this image in. Here we go. It's from the lovely Clive de Carle. Lovely Clive de Carle. And Clive de Carle and wonderful people who work with him are offering one of our viewers membership to Clive de Carle's Secret Health Club membership for one lucky viewer. And it retails at $100, about £83. There are over 110 categories of fully searchable, archived natural health articles, audio and video resources, all uncensored and free from media manipulation. And that's available at the Secret Health Club. And you have access to Clive's Health Mastery and Health Revolution video series, and the 11-part series that he did for Iconic as well. You also have access to Ask Clive Anything, which is a Zoom video conferencing sessions that are held monthly for members. There is access to over 180, over 830 videos, presentations, lectures, interviews, some of the leading natural health practitioners and pioneers. All videos have been transcribed and are searchable. I mean, this is a fantastic prize. It is a fab prize, Reba. Absolutely wonderful. Regular monthly membership, offers and discounts. And it just really gives you an opportunity to connect with the rather fabulous Clive de Carle, his team, and fellow lovers of natural health. And you can be a winner of access to this Secret Health Club. All you have to do is write to me by 6 p.m. Tuesday, 6 p.m. GMT on Tuesday, the 23rd of December at soniapoulton@sky.com. Put Clive in the subject heading and one random person picked will receive that. It's a beautiful prize, Boop, isn't it? Love natural health, says Vanessa. Very, very kind of you. Thank you, Clive and co. You people are amazing. Absolutely. This is the wonderful Carrie Richardson. And Carrie, I have always mispronounced your name, pretty much like I mispronounce everybody's, actually. It's part of my charm. She says, it's excellent prize. Synchronized Soul loves Clive's voice. What's not to love, right? What's not to love? And do you know what? We cannot talk about 2025 without reflecting on what has happened regarding Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, for goodness sake, the reverberations are just continuing. It's really quite astonishing stuff. Let me see if I've got some images that I can pull up here. And because obviously what has happened throughout 2025 is Epstein has continued to haunt them, either from the grave or from his beachside hut in Tel Aviv, whichever you want to think about what happened to Jeffrey Epstein. We were told the official narrative, of course, was that he died in his prison cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York on August the 10th, 2019. Nobody with any intelligence believes that he killed himself, but the 2025 saga of Epstein and those who wanted him and his memories dead and buried has continued. The whole year has pretty much been full of it, really. And what you have is this kind of explosion of the uber wealthy men and women who went to his home and his island and how compromised they were. And you had Trump doing his darndest for the so-called Epstein files not to be released. You had Peter Mandelson, who had to be let go from his role as American ambassador because of his former close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. You had Prince Andrew, who's downgraded. He can't even be called you can't even be called Prince anymore. He's now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and they are moving him out of Royal Lodge to a very nice place in Norfolk. He'll still be living a life of luxury, but he's been so tainted. So tainted. And the release of Epstein related documents this week confirm what I have been saying forever. Teen girls were part of the gatekeeping operation to make us believe children were not involved. They were. Children were involved. Has anybody seen this video? This video was part of the tranche of stuff that has been released, and I've lifted up the volume and I've put a caption to it. This is Jeffrey Epstein on his flight, and that's a child's voice. Have a listen. Oh, is it not? Oh, let me see if that'll play. I'm going to bring that in again. I want to bring that in again. It's a pain when it doesn't work because, you know, these things happen, but I'm going to bring that in again because I think that's absolutely key. And the thing is that we have been sold a lie. We've been sold an absolute lie that, no, it's not wanting to find it for me, but I'm going to find it. I am going to find it. Epstein files. I'm determined to. I'm absolutely determined to, people. And sometimes it could take a little longer than others in order to be able to find it. Oh, where did it go? I will find it. And I'll find it at some stage. Yes, I will. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I won't. Oh, what's this? No. Anyway, this is a typical example of some imagery. And, you know, these files tell us how degenerate these people are. What I was looking for and what wouldn't play on StreamYard was Jeffrey Epstein on his flight. And you can hear a child's voice saying, "Where are you taking us?" That's what you can hear. And it is absolutely evident and clear that what people like me have been saying forever is the truth, is that this was an international operation where people were not only blackmailed. Look, that is a child's foot. That's like a baby's. That's probably a 6-year-old's foot. This is what they've been hiding from us. And this is what is now coming out, whether they want us to see it or not. That's the reality. So after nearly a whole year of procrastinating, what you had, Trump was forced to sign the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And this weekend was at the end of last week, this weekend, you had they had a legal deadline where the Department of Justice had to release the initial tranche of hundreds of thousands of documents. There is material included never before, which includes unreleased photos of high-profile figures such as Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, Michael Jackson, Mick Jagger, Donald Trump. And just to be very clear, just because he's pictured with people doesn't automatically mean that they are responsible for criminal activity. But nonetheless, why was Trump so keen not to put all of this out? And the problem is that they've put this stuff out, but it's heavily redacted, over 550 pages, fully blacked out, many photos obscured, including pictures of like Virginia Giuffre. It doesn't make any sense. There's been disappearing content less than 24 hours after the release. At least 16 files disappeared from the Department of Justice's public website, including photos of Donald Trump alongside Epstein, Melania Trump, and Ghislaine Maxwell. There are people who are saying that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, needs to be imprisoned. That she is. There are allegations that she is doctoring stuff on behalf of her boss, Donald Trump. And it's interesting. Yes. Massey, or is it Macy? Thomas Macy, isn't it, is going after Pam Bondi? Yes, indeed he is. Yes, exactly, Eric. Picture found of small dentist-like chair, child size with straps for tying. I mean, just horrible stuff. And Carol said Trump held it back to get people noticing and screaming for it to be released. Carol, are you of the mind that Trump was doing this as some sort of strategy? Because I'm of the mind that Trump is part of the problem. I have to tell you here and now, I do not trust him at all. He had a very long and enduring relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Yes, they broke it off before Epstein died, quite a long while before Epstein died, but nonetheless, they had a long relationship. And one of those images is a drawer full of images of Trump. And that's now been taken off the DOJ website. Now, I heard the Deputy Attorney General saying that some survivors have come forward and said, we don't want our images released. And it could well be that that's part of it. But I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced at all, because Trump wanted us to believe that there was nothing to be had. In fact, do we remember when Trump had a go at a reporter? I remember that very clearly. And that really started to show people up for who they are. And do we remember? So what the Trump administration did was they put out what they called phase one, and they had all these kind of bought and paid for American influencers like libs of TikTok, etc. And they went along to the White House. They were given this folder with stuff that was already available online. Absolutely ridiculous. But Trump did not want this to come out. I don't believe for a second that he held it back in order to be able to raise awareness of it. I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. Not at all. Because he was awful with that reporter. He said, are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. And then Trump wanted to talk about different things. He wanted to talk about Texas. He wanted to talk about, and he said, and people still talking about this guy, this creep, that is unbelievable. And then when the reporter wanted to talk to Pam Bondi, Trump was really aggressive and said to Pam Bondi, do you really want to waste your time? Do you feel like answering? Trump is not on the side of victims here. Nobody can convince me that. Absolutely not. Trump has been protecting the people who have contributed to making him president for a second term, if anything. And Trump put my back up then, put back some millions of people, the arrogance, the lack of care for victims and survivors. And he sounded like he absolutely wanted to move on from that subject, because somehow it's a subject he needs to move on from. And now we're starting to see why. And then, of course, you had that situation where he had the falling out with his bromance boyfriend, Elon Musk. And Elon Musk tweeted on the 6th of June this year, time to drop the really big bomb. At real Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. And Elon Musk backtracked to a certain degree, saying that I regret some of my posts about President Donald Trump last week. They went too far, but he didn't say which ones. And then, of course, what we've had is the Oversight Committee releasing information throughout the year, releasing pictures. But what's been released this last weekend has been the biggest amount of all. And look here, not there. That's right. And I don't need Elon Musk to tell me what is right or wrong here. Trump's team judged public mood badly. See, what they did was the big problem for Trump and his administration, Attorney General Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, all of them, is they relied on social media to get Trump in for a second term. They made all manner of claims that appealed to their base, including, we're going to reveal the truth about Epstein. And then they shat all over their base. That is the reality. And so much has happened on Trump's watch. Epstein died in prison while Trump was president. The Department of Justice closed Epstein's case while Trump is president. Ghislaine Maxwell is moved to a much more comfortable environment after having a meeting with the Deputy Attorney General. And all of this is very interesting. This is a story of wealth, fame, privilege, of industrial scale of abuse of children and teenage girls, of a cover-up lasting decades and at the highest level of society and continuing right up until this very week. It's a sorry story of international conspiracy, and it matters. It really matters. It's not a distraction. There are survivors who have not received justice. And I'm sick and tired of people like Kash Patel, who permanently looks as if he's about to be shot. Like that, right? Awful. Beware of Elons. Absolutely, boob. Absolutely, indeed. And Essa said, like the pandemic, this will not go away. Indeed, indeed. And they're all culpable. We know they are all culpable, right? It doesn't matter which side of the political aisle they're on. For goodness sake, in Epstein's house, he had a picture of Bill Clinton in a blue dress, which he'd had commissioned, right? Loads of images of Epstein with whomever. Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Richard Branson, Stephen Hawking, you name it. We never know the real truth. I don't know about that, but I mean, I believe that we do know the truth. In us, we know the truth. Our gut knows the truth. But anyway, the whole thing is an absolute shite show. I mean, the fact that Kash Patel actually said under oath, right? He's the FBI director. And he actually said under oath, there's no credible information that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked minors. Well, now we found out that 40 minors gave sworn testimonies that they had been trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. The cover-up is out in the open. They can't keep a lid on it anymore. That is the reality. And Epstein didn't acquire these children on his own or for his own self. And so even though we are told he is dead, supposedly, there is still room for charging to take place. That is the reality. People are complicit in this. And remember that ridiculous video that Pam Bondi in the Department of Justice issued of the prison video. Do you remember that? Ended up with more questions than answers. In it, we saw Epstein being escorted to his cell around 7:49 p.m. on August the 9th, when he and then the remainder of the night, the only recorded activity near his cell was a guard seen walking toward it around 10:39 p.m., followed by another appearance of a camera at 10:41 p.m. But there was a missing minute on the video, and people are wise to these things now. So they released that video with a missing minute and expected us to suck it up. That's what they expected us to do. Outrageous stuff. And, you know, the FBI, Department of Justice, all of it, terrible stuff. And there's been so many problems, obviously, around the so-called death of Jeffrey Epstein, including the missing minutes of the video. Guards on duty were later charged with multiple counts of recording of falsification. There were numerous issues with the camera apparently not working, although they managed to make it work for the videos they released, right? Deep bloody swamp. And of course, Epstein was very selective with his friendships. He liked people in high places and very ambitious, which is also why he linked up with Ghislaine Maxwell, daughter of a spy, fraud and media boss, Robert Maxwell. And Ghislaine Maxwell met Epstein. Her father, Robert, was friends with Epstein. And she brought contacts into Epstein's life, including Prince Andrew, very famously. And I mean, Andrew cannot survive any of this, and keep a place in public life. He simply can't. Very famous picture where they were walking in Central Park in December 2010. And, you know, Andrew has lied persistently throughout all of this. But the reality is Epstein, it seemed, could command friendships with royals and politicians alike. And that included Peter Mandelson, who sought to distance himself from Jeffrey Epstein as best as he humanly could, had become the US ambassador. We have to look back now and wonder why Peter Mandelson was given the role of US ambassador. And I think it was to do with his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and because Trump had to approve it. I think they all thought they could keep a lid on this one. That's the problem. We are in this together. Absolutely. Mr. Windsor, I presume. Right. So, so the reverberations have been felt throughout the whole year. And Peter Mandelson has not escaped this at all. Neither of any of the people who went to Epstein Island. We're still learning more about it. But it gives me no pleasure to be proven right that when I said they are using teen girls to make us believe that what they've done is lesser than, that's not to say that the abuse of teen girls is lesser than. Not for me, it's not. But in the eyes of the public, it is often considered, when you've got teen girls who were they were getting $200 a whack from him for doing a massage, right? So in the eyes of the public, it's like, well, those girls knew what they were doing. They were 14, 15. It's a whole lot different when children are involved. Children were involved, and the gatekeeping operation was to make us believe it was teen girls. Kind of glad you couldn't play it, Sonia. I got you. Probably I wasn't meant to. Anyway, we cannot forget the role of all of these people, including those bloody MAGA influencers. Disgusting MAGA influencers. This was a con to keep the MAGA base on side. This whole thing about phase one, it was piecemeal. It was never about reaching an honest conclusion. This took place on February 27th, 2025, when a group of 15 right-wing influencers visited the White House. They emerged with binders labeled the Epstein Files Phase 1 that they had obtained from Attorney General Pam Bondi. And all of the stuff was available online. We all knew it. Including Epstein's address book. Most of it was redacted anyway. Pam Bondi is in trouble. Pam Bondi is in a lot of trouble. And if she carries on covering for her boss, she's going to get in more trouble. Yes, indeed she is. And J.D. Vance, oh my God, I think all of them, they've all gone from saying we must get justice for Epstein survivors to doing everything they could to stop this information coming out. And that includes all of them. So, and we also cannot forget the role of external influence when it came to Jeffrey Epstein, and none more so than Israel. And the case has absolutely been made for Israeli involvement in this and the Mossad. We've heard about it a lot. And there was the link, obviously, with Robert Maxwell and Ghislaine Maxwell. We're at 11:11, people. They will do anything to hold on to power. Yes, indeed, they will. Seen it. You've seen it. Yes, indeed. And so the case for Israel has absolutely been made. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you had a former Israeli prime minister stayed at Epstein's house dozens of times. Epstein also ran a pro-Israel charity. He helped Mossad and CIA connect during the Iran-Contra scandal. He did all manner of things. He had, when his closets were searched, one of the passports he had was an Israeli passport. Yes, Mrs. Skeptical, I'm not necessarily convinced that Trump took part. Trump definitely surrounded himself with young females, no doubt about it. But the problem is that because I think Trump and Epstein were like lads about town. I think that was their gig together. But it's also unsavory. And the problem is Trump is involved because I believe that he delayed the release of this information because he was attempting to protect people who funded his campaign, including people from the Israeli lobby, which is where we're up to now. And so I think that's really what's happened. There has long been evidence of Epstein's connection to Israel. Absolutely, there has. And there's also the issue of Epstein installing concealed cameras in numerous places on his properties to allegedly record sexual activity with, who knows, underage girls, children, prominent people for criminal purposes such as blackmail. It wouldn't be the first time. It wouldn't be a first time. So the gatekeeping operation was an absolute lie. And, you know, I think the reverberations will continue. But we all know the end. I mean, anybody with their faculties in place knows that Epstein did not kill himself, that Epstein was absolutely an abuser of children, that Epstein did not work alone, that Epstein had clients in terms of who he was involved in procuring young people for the rich and famous, and the price they paid was blackmail. We haven't heard half the story yet. We haven't heard what has gone on at Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. We haven't heard about organs being harvested, about cloning. Epstein was a transhumanist, like a lot of these tech bros. And you know what's crazy about a lot of the information and the imagery that's been released now is that Epstein did not hide his perversions. He flaunted it in front of his friends. They knew. There was an image of Epstein sat at his desk with a really weird photo on his desk involving a child. And Steve Bannon, formerly of Breitbart and was formerly involved with Trump, is sat in front of him. People knew. No matter their political affiliations, they knew. Whoever crossed paths with him, whoever was invited into his inner sanctum, it was all around. Imagery and art, perverse imagery and art. They are all degenerates. M doesn't believe that Epstein is dead. And valid. Absolutely valid. And I just kind of miss the version of Trump's administration when they all wanted justice for Epstein victims instead of wanting to cover it all up. So there you go. And of course, most famously, probably the most famous Epstein victim has to be Virginia Giuffre, doesn't it? And Virginia, 2025, claimed to have been trafficked to Prince Andrew, as well as an assortment of famous people, including statesmen, a prime minister, and billionaires. Was said to have died by suicide at her Australian farmhouse in April of this year at the age of 41. Following her death, her memoir, Nobody's Girl, was published posthumously in October 2025. I did a very lengthy review of it. I think I have already put the link in the description. If not, I will at the end of the stream. Really ugly stuff. She prominently accused Jeffrey Epstein of trafficking, and she sued Prince Andrew. Famously was said to have been paid $12 million by the Queen in order for it not to ruin, I think it was the Queen's Jubilee festivities. And still big question marks, of course. I said, yeah, I do believe actually that she took her own life, but I'm not actually completely certain about that anymore. I think there are question marks over it, especially when you read Nobody's Girl. I'm still not convinced about some of Nobody's Girl. Nobody's Girl really, it was published after she died, so she didn't have a final say. Other people had a final say what it entailed. And some people said that it played down the allegations of abuse from her father, played down anything to do with Donald Trump, and it didn't name certain people, such as an Israeli prime minister that she had previously accused of being trafficked to. But really sad state of affairs. I had struggled with some of Virginia. Did I call her Victoria? Sorry, I often do that, but I hope I didn't. I struggled with some of things that Virginia had said when she was alive, certainly because when people were going to her and saying, I can give you some important information because Ghislaine Maxwell tried to pick me up too. And Virginia would just kind of rubbish some other survivors and be quite mean and quite nasty. It was like she wanted to gatekeep the operation, and she was part of the gatekeeping operation. Because if we are now seeing pictures featuring young children and hearing young children, she knew they were there. And that's not something that she wanted to discuss very much. Not at all. And again, it could be because she worried for her life. And that's the reality. So, but I remember getting really quite tearful doing the review of her book, because it was really heartbreaking, because she was only a 16-year-old girl when she was first recruited. She was working at a spa at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, working with her dad. She was like a towel girl. They recruited her. And just very, very sad what happened to her. And now what you have is her family and her husband, who was heavily accused of domestic violence. They're all fighting over her money. And also, Stephen says she is no hero either. And the reality is, Virginia was also recruiting young girls for Epstein and getting paid for it as well. So, these things are highly complex. But I'll tell you who are absolutely victims: the children. Right? The children. And even the 14-year-olds who were being paid $200 a pop, $300 to give a massage, they're still victims. They were still children from broken homes, difficult times. Virginia's story was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, it opens with her kind of like being this bloody mess, sitting on a sidewalk, having been just beaten up and had a like a gun held to her and everything. It's just horrible, horrible, horrible stuff. And there is a lot in today's live. Yeah. And, the thing is, let's face it, nothing and no one. And Virginia did talk about Israel and the impact of Israel and the influence of Israel. And let's face it, nothing and no one has had the money and reach to spread their message in the way that Israel has this year. Infiltrated the US and the UK. The shilling on social media is absolutely outrageous. There was an admission. There were documents which were filed with the US Department of Justice under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, also known as FARA, that said the Israeli government allocated nearly $900,000 for an influencer campaign. And what we were being told was that influencers were being paid an estimated $7,000 per post on platforms like TikTok and X and Instagram. So we know that the influence of Israel is still oppressive. It's still ongoing. And I think that there is room to question any Israeli involvement in the death of Virginia Giuffre, given that she had named an Israeli prime minister. So I think that's interesting. The shilling on social media is absolutely outrageous. We've seen it all. I mean, people are literally being paid to shill for a foreign power. And anyone who takes foreign money, in my opinion, to promote the interests of another country over their own country is a traitor. And I don't care whether that's your favorite far-right activist or not. I don't care whether it's a politician, a podcaster, or a protester. The scales have fallen from eyes this year, right? And people are seeing who has been bought amongst us, who are the propagandists and agent provocateurs. We've seen it. We know who they are. There is nowhere for them to hide, right? They've never been more visible. This is our chance, to heal from the filth that has been dumped on us over a long period of time. And so when social media influencers state things like "I stand with Israel," we should know whether this is a paid promotion or not. Much of it is. That is the reality. And the Israeli government have had to work super hard this year because of the ongoing genocide in the Middle East. Their promotion has had to be, of course, it's well funded. But these people who were found to have taken money to shill on social media should be cast aside, should never be listened to ever again. The world has tilted off its axis, says MB. And of course, don't forget, I did a lengthy video about the UK infiltration of Friends of Israel. Friends of Israel, huge lobby group, and has sway over Parliament, Conservative Friends of Israel, Labour Friends of Israel. You have the British Friends of Israel all around us, absolutely infiltrating our country. They are active in political, business, media links. And it is absolutely about pushing the Zionist agenda. And we've seen that. And again, I've, as I say, I've done deep dive into that, and I may or may not have already put a link in the description. If I haven't, I will. And you have people like Robert Jenrick, MP, who has accepted donations from a family friend who shipped arms to Israel. And Robert Jenrick has been calling for the Star of David to be displayed at every entry point to the UK. Yeah, that's really going to happen, mate. That is really going to happen. And knowledge said, I'm just waiting for Christmas to get out of the way, and then I'm getting my receipts out. Got you. The light at the end of the tunnel is on. Oh, yes, it is. And we are rampaging towards it. Yes, indeed, we are. And of course, you cannot do a review of 2025 without involving Charlie Kirk and his merry widow, Erika Kirk. Right? Because it's been such a huge feature, international news. So let me just, who has the rights to Virginia's book? Says Soldier. Well, it's owned by her estate, and her estate at the moment, I believe, well, it's actually, that's the problem, because she died intestate, which means that she didn't leave a will. So the publishers presumably have a hefty chunk of it for a start. And merry widow indeed, says SMG. Indeed. Very disconcerting, the stuff that has been coming out of the Kirk camp. And we all know it, and we all feel it's weird, right? So, well, let's start. First of all, I think we start with Charlie Kirk himself. And Charlie Kirk, of course, conservative influencer. The co-founder and executive director of Turning Point USA was said to have been assassinated on September the 10th, 2025, while speaking at Utah Valley University. He was 31, became one of the most significant political events of the year, believe it or not, led to nationwide mourning in the US, and a posthumous award of the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Donald Trump. And interesting stuff. Following a 30-hour manhunt, 22-year-old Tyler James Robinson was arrested at his home in southern Utah. He faces charges of aggravated murder and weapons offenses. And investigators have said that the attack was politically motivated, that Tyler Robinson was a lefty. Charlie Kirk was notorious conservative, more on the right of politics. And Robinson made an in-person court appearance on December the 11th. His next hearing is scheduled for January the 16th, 2026. But many of us believe, and that includes Charlie Kirk's friend, Candace Owen, that there is so much more that has taken place here. That doesn't make sense, that Tyler Robinson is almost certainly a patsy. And we've covered this in great detail on Wake Up, including having debates about it, significantly so. But it's, I think, almost what's happened after he died is almost, and I mean this in no disrespect, is almost more significant than him dying, because it's been quite extraordinary. And what's happened is that his wife, Erika, took over the mantle of Turning Point USA. Now, Erika is the weirdest widow I think I've ever encountered in my entire life. She's so supremely weird. And, you know, you see memes, right? There's this famous meme, right? Which is like, let this love not find me, right? Whenever I look at Erika Kirk, I think of her. Let this kind of love not find me, because she is the merriest widow I've ever seen, I think, in my entire life. And yes, allowing for the fact that everybody grieves differently, her grieving is on a scale that I have never seen before. Like I've never seen before. Do we remember 2 days after her husband was said to have been shot, she appeared in his kind of like office, at his base where he would do his recording, and she actually laughed. I mean, she actually laughed. I think I've actually got that video, which if I can show it, yeah, here.
My heart is with every one of my husband's employees who lost a friend and a mentor. I want to thank the staffers of his amazing Charlie Kirk show.
That should have been the tell that everybody needed. And we shouldn't have needed to necessarily have seen her where she had a videographer picturing her apparently with her husband's dead cold hand in his casket, in his coffin. Weird stuff. But she's gone on now. She is now the leader of Turning Point USA, the organization founded by her husband. And she's emerged as this prominent figure who's now endorsing JD Vance. And they had their Amfest this weekend. Oh my days. I mean, just unbelievable. She brought on Nicki Minaj. Her husband said Nicki Minaj was a terrible role model for young girls. Erika Kirk is doing everything she can to rewrite who her husband was. She did this thing of saying that he'd come home every Friday and say Shabbat Shalom and throw his phone. He wasn't Jewish, he was Christian. But Erika Kirk is Jewish. They'd gone to Israel several times together. Erika Kirk, very involved with the Netanyahu family and Israeli events. And she is absolutely refashioning her husband as some sort of Jewish leader. Really weird stuff. And many people truly believe that she is an actor acting out a script. And, you know, as I say, grief affects us all in different ways, but I've never seen anybody like her. Really weird stuff. Like she clearly always wanted to be famous. I am in no doubt whatsoever. Like that she's coming out to applause and fireworks, and people are on social media saying, if I lose my wife, I'm praying that she doesn't find a new man within 3 months. I hadn't even accounted for, you know, fireworks. And it's so weird. The whole thing is really weird. And her history is obviously very weird. A lot has come out about that and her involvement with charities in Romania, you know, the fact that she was essentially like a pageant woman. And she has now assumed leadership of the entire organization, and they are bringing in millions of pounds. And she is now, you know, obviously pro JD Vance, and all of that's really weird as well. She compared her husband to JD Vance. It's all scripted, said MK Iggy. It's a hot mess indeed. Erika Kirk simply projects phony, and I'm not happy saying that, said MB. And that's the problem, MB. None of us are happy saying it because we want to have empathy and sympathy for a widow, right? But the problem is, even people who are not involved in any of this, they said there's something wrong with this woman. They think there's something wrong with this woman. And I get it. And you know what? This weekend at the Turning Point USA, you never guess what they did. They recreated the Prove Me Wrong tent that when Charlie Kirk was executed and people could have selfies with. Anybody see that? These people are so weird. They're not like us. I say this often, but I think when you get big players like that, they're just not like us. This is what they did. They recreated this and people could have selfies. She's weird. We're all suspicious of her. Something's wrong. You know what, Jantos? I think there must be something to be said for her, the potential of her being a handler. Central casting, all in masks. Trump talked about central casting before, didn't he? Absolutely, he did. So it's all really weird. That her behavioural inconsistencies are there for all to see. She does no tear crying. Body language analysts have looked at her body and noted that her facial expressions often do not match tone of her voice. This weird demonic thing that she does when she was being interviewed by journalist Barry Wise last week, and she was like, you know, I can't even do it. I mean, I can't even do it, but she kind of looks like that, and it's just weird. It's just really weird. These people are not like us. We may never know, and I'm okay with this. Got you. Taste is all wrong. Very, very, very wrong. But it was a big story, massive story. And so, you know, other things, of course, happened this year, like how we all laughed. Do you remember early this year when there was that Katy Perry space mission? Absolutely ridiculous stuff with Gayle King and like Lauren Sanchez. They went on Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin's NS-31 mission, performing What a Wonderful World from orbit. Again, a stunt, demonic stunt, ridiculous people. And then, you know, like in terms of entertainment, I don't think anything beats the very weird people from the cast of Wicked for Good, Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, very weird behavior. They all look like they've lost a ton of weight, and they all look like they've been MK Ultra'd. Very weird stuff. It's kind of my review, and I just want to talk about one of my personal favorite memories of 2025, and it happened last week. Yes, it did. I had a very interesting comment about me from a judge in the High Court, and I wanted to share it with you. So I've written about it before, but just to recap, in 2021, I was interviewed by the Metropolitan Police over an alleged reporting restriction breach. It was during a recorded interview with the eternally dodgy Sean Atwood. I had accidentally said the first two names of the children involved in what was to become known as the Hampstead hoax. And I'm sure you remember this story. I'm sure you do. A video was put out of a brother and sister claiming to have been victims of a satanic school in North London. And I had never been involved in the story, ever. I had always been concerned about the children involved. And when I was asked about the case by Sean Atwood, I gave my opinion and accidentally said the children's first two names. Well, nothing new to the audience who knew the case inside and out, but there was a reporting restriction on it, and I made a mistake. Okay, well, a blogger reported me to the Attorney General. The Attorney General set the Metropolitan Police on me. I gave a voluntary interview about it. They investigated me. They decided there was no charge or caution necessary. And in fact, the cop interviewing me talked about my important work safeguarding children. Then about 6 months later, the police ruled no further action. Well, I've seen trolls come into this live stream and characterize that and claim that I have been involved in child abuse. Yes, really. They've literally said that I have been involved in child abuse on the basis of that. Anyway, the subject of it came up before a high court judge last week, and he had heard the recording of me talking with Sean Atwood. And you're thinking, oh my God, this is not going to pan out well for her. A judge has heard when another judge has already put a reporting restriction on it. And the judge was aware that a high court judge had put an order on the case that people could not identify the children. And the judge had a barrister saying that I had undermined the judge's ruling and that this was child abuse. And the judge, as I say, was aware of everything, that I'd been interviewed by the police. He'd heard the tape, and I was shocked by what the judge had to say about this. I was shocked. And this is now officially one of my favorite memories of 2025. He said what I had said, even while I was breaching, allegedly, that reporting restriction. He said that what I had said wasn't child abuse. In fact, if anything, it was the reverse. It was the opposite. He said what I had said was about protecting the children. And besides, I had addressed my error. Now, that shocked me, because that's a high court judge who is commenting on me allegedly breaching a reporting restriction that another judge had set. And he said that what she was saying was not child abuse. I was thrown away. Play the clip. Christine, I cannot play the clip. It was subject to all manner of criminal issues and question marks. But Synchronized Soul, that is fantastic. You know, this has been going on now since 2021. And that blew my mind. Big up yourself, Judge. And that was one of my favorite memories of this year. Absolutely, it was. Because it's really good when people I do everything I can to protect children. So when you have trolls coming into our comments and trying to lie and smear and defame me and use that and say I was involved in child abuse, it's not good. And it's obviously misleads people. But when you have somebody as senior as a high court judge who knew, he knows I'm a protector of children. And that was incredible. That was incredible. Yes, exactly, Shin. That was incredible. Right. Competition winners from last week. We had a couple of bags to give away. Lovely Anita. She gave away a couple of bags to Linda Isaac in Swansea, to Jenny Garrett in Hereford, and tarot reading to Karen Evans and Dave Thompson. I know Dave has already had his tarot reading, which is amazing. Then there was also the workshop that's been won by Lyra Midsummer, who's also based in the Northwest. Then we had Sean Parker, who very kindly gave away 5 books, to Sarah in Leicester, to Sarah in Abingdon, to Emma in Luton, to Louise in Hants, and Maria in Orlando, New South Wales, Australia. And Maria, when I notified Maria that she was one of the winners, she came back and was like, I'm in Australia, you might not be able to send it. Well, no, we have, love. It's okay. I've sorted out the postage and it's on its way to you. And I want to give away this. You've got this. This is a book by Dr. Michaela Dunbar. And these are brilliant practical tips of you overcoming everything from anxiety to overthinking to you might be a highly sensitive person, all of these different things. And the first randomly selected person tomorrow, 6 p.m. GMT, receives this. Send it to Sonia Poulton at sky.com and that book is yours. 7 Steps to a Life You Love. Well done, folks. Congratulations, lovelies. Indeed. And thank you as ever to all my magnificent donators. Thank you to wonderful people on the chat, to Paul Trainer, to Daniel Krause, to Catherine Hutton. Thank you to Eleanor J, to Merv W, to Helen OC, to Stuart R, who wrote, Hi, Sonia. If you pass Motormouth Malone, that's Carol Malone, in the street again, please thank her for getting the festive spirit underway. Watching her groveling on GB News was one of the highlights of the year. And so what had happened, Carol Malone, media hack, presenter on GB News, she had to apologize to Meghan Markle's mother, Doria Ragland, for falsely claiming on live TV that Doria Ragland had been imprisoned, had spent a spell behind bars. So pretty awful stuff. Thank you always to other people who've given a super chat. I managed to pick up some names: Lenticular Cloud, Nymph, and Swiss Miss. Thank you all. Always appreciate it. And I just to say that thank you. Just thank you. Wake Up is dedicated to you. I am very proud of what we have achieved in the last year and a half with Wake Up. The thing about Wake Up is we are growing organically, right? I'm not interested in clickbait. Everybody knows that about me. I know you can amass a lot of followers in a short period of time by writing titles that engage people, even if they mislead people. But I don't do that. That's not what I'm about. It's not for me. I don't do clickbait. It's short-termism. I'm looking for Wake Up to be here in the long term and not be seen as a fly-by-night. And we're already established now. I'm not interested in manipulating people. I'm interested in people finding me and sharing what we do around here by word of mouth recommendations. This year, we passed over 100K subscribers on YouTube. Over 100K on X, and our little channels on Rumble, Spotify, and Blue Sky are growing. And I was looking at the stats for our YouTube channel. Do you know, on our YouTube channel alone, we've had 10.1 million views. Incredible stuff. I've always said this, to borrow from a very famous quote, and that is, build it and they will come. And you've enabled us to do that. You know, you've shown up here week after week, and it's great. And like many people, there has been a dark shadow cast over us since 2020. I've said it a lot during this show. This has been a bad period for humanity. I've been told by contacts and friends all around the world that this year does not feel like Christmas, that the luster has gone off of it. And I get that. We have been subjected to one psychological assault after another in the name of their devilish gods, right? They love their money, they love their power, they love their greed, they love their control, they love manifesting it in experimental jabs administered to vulnerable people all around the world, in digital IDs, in a cashless society, in extreme unfettered access to our country via migration. The populace being ignored as our so-called leaders answer more to the billionaires than they do to us. But on Wake Up, I acknowledge that. I try and acknowledge as much as possible the people who are rough, very roughshod ridden over, and people who aren't given a platform, and voices that are maligned. And I always try and give people, as I say, a platform who wouldn't necessarily get one. And so, in terms of how people are feeling right now, I get it, right? We're all in need of a break. I'm definitely in need of one. I certainly feel like that. Maybe it's time just to be easy on yourself, And so if you celebrate Christmas or you don't, either way, right? The seasons in the Northern Hemisphere already tell us it's time to bed down a little bit. And so I'm going to take the next 2 weeks off and spend some time with my loved ones, which I'm very much looking forward to. As ever, I want to thank always my wonderful patrons. I see this morning we've got a new patron, Diane Horsley. Thank you for joining us. Patron details are below. You can join up to Patreon for as little as £2 a month. That's where I always give information first, whether that's to do with Wake Up or whatever. And I just want to thank you all. Anybody who's been involved in Wake Up this year, whether that's guests, whether that's people writing in, whether that's suggestions for guests, whether it's the wonderful people on the live chat, right? It's absolutely wonderful to have you with us. And Tube Addict, I have to go. I've been here nearly 3 hours. It's an hour and a half. But I just want you to know that I appreciate so very, 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 very much. You people are incredible. And, we've got through this year together. We've been through some incredible times together on the live chat and at Wake Up. And all of your communications mean the world to me. Keep writing. Thank you so much. And as I say, whether you celebrate or not, happy season to you. Happy Christmas to you. Happy holidays, or however you want to view it. I'm not here to want to try and put a kind of moratorium on what you can or cannot say. So, have a lovely Christmas to you too, John. I love you too, Em. Lots and lots of love to you. Thank you to everyone, as I say, who has supported Wake Up. We will be back on the first Monday in January. And just to say, you really do need a rest right now, because as the saying goes, there is virtue in work and there is virtue in rest. Use both and overlook neither. Love and light to you all. I wish you much love. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Peter, for your super chat. Very much appreciate it. Thank you, Isa. And just to say, please check out my legal page. I have to raise legal funds in January. And if you can help, please do. I know times are difficult for many, many people. But as I say, if you can help, please do, because I have a legal fund which supports me in my work as an investigative journalist and any litigation that may arise as a consequence of my work. Sending love to you all. I love you too, Fazana. Thank you. Lots of love to you all, people. See you in 2026. One love all.